Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to an even day 800, actually. And it's good to see you all once again. And the Russian Air Force is having some big league trouble. And once again, good to see you all.
And a surface-to-surface missile a day keeps the Russian Air Force away, as we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news, and it has been a really fun day. Because many of y'all will know that Ukrainian attacks have been hitting Russian SAM sites throughout the entirety of occupied Ukraine, and also been hitting Russian airfields within the area of the Russian Don. And it appears that all of this culminated today in the British Ministry of Defense's intelligence finding out that the Russian Air Force is packing up and pretty much leaving the theater. Almost not going to be there anymore, and if they are, it's going to be in much more smaller numbers, because the Russians are now scared that the Air Force may end up getting targeted and destroyed, because they literally have absolutely no way at all to protect the Air Force. So this is massive news, and we'll be helping out the Ukrainian ground situation here in the very near future. And there's a lot else to talk about as well. We got some little bits of news inside of Russia. We've also been able to hear possible sabotage and espionage happening inside of Berlin, Germany. We also got to hear incredible news about the Italians, possibly providing some kind of support or equipment here in the very near future. And we also got to hear that things are still heating up inside the Middle East, with a little bit of additional action happening down there. And of course, last but not least, the cherry on top, all of the frontline combat action that we've been able to find in video and picture evidence being put out onto this map today. There is a lot of news to cover, loads of news, and we have to get into it without further delay. And so we're going to be moving on, first off, into the area of Moscow, because today we got to see something that was very interesting. The Russians have put the Western tanks, the tanks of evil, on display inside of the area around Red Square in Moscow. I was able to find a very interesting video as a Russian citizen, as brave as he was, walked up to an Abrams and faced it down and threatened it with his own bare hands. The true fear of the West at the might of the singular Russian was unbelievable. And truly, I have to say that this channel is going to have to switch allegiances now after this display of raw strength and force. Allow me to show y'all this ever war-changing deal. This has made me completely change my mindset on the war, but without further ado, here's the clip. This man here, he's poking the tank, and he's waving his fist at it. My god, y'all, the Russians have won. It's over.
Go ahead and punch it, old man. See what happens.
Look, he did it again. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he got his fist even closer to let the tank know he's threatening yet not the sign, because we need to know that. But oh my goodness.
He's doing that old school stuff too. He's putting his dukes up saying, come on, you want some? You want some? It's like, what is this guy doing, man? It's so cringy.
You'll do what you're told. But beyond that, all jokes aside, this has not changed my stance at all. You know, just making sure that people get that clear on the Ukraine war. The Ukrainians are still doing incredibly well. The Russians got one Abrams and one M1-150 breacher assault vehicle, and they put them on display along with, I believe, a Leopard 2 and maybe a Bradley and a couple of other vehicles, and they're acting like they've won the war. I think they're forgetting that there are thousands of other tanks in the West of these exact same kinds, and not only that, there are still dozens, if not hundreds of more of these things that are going to wind up in Ukraine here in the near future. But this is something that, I gotta say, is also really interesting as well. The Russian government must understand that the public inside of the Russian Federation is so stupid, they actually had to get stickers and clean off certain parts of each armored vehicle and put stickers of the flags of the countries that these vehicles come from, so that way the Russian public knows who is what. So that way they know that this is an American vehicle and not a German vehicle or a British vehicle, because the Russian public literally just knows that little about anything going on in the world as far as weaponry is concerned. Also, another thing is that when we look at this here, let me see if we can get a zoom in on the sign, we can see that this says, in English, in Russian and in English, M1-150 Assault Breacher Vehicle, or in ABV. And it goes through a little bit of stats and details about the vehicle, probably explains where it ended up getting knocked out as well. for people to read. And I'm sure, sadly, we didn't really get a high definition look at this. And Matthew, if you could do me a favor, try and see if you could find any more additional pictures of any of the vehicles and weapons that were on display here inside of Moscow. Because if we could actually read this, it would be a very interesting insight to the kind of propaganda that the Russian government is now putting out to the public about how this tank even ended up inside of Moscow. Because I'm sure that has been greatly exaggerated to a large degree. But nevertheless, we can see that the Russians are trying to show off a large amount of Western vehicles, and in particular, it's only Western vehicles that were in this display from what I could find. The Russians are trying to make it look like they're fighting the collective West inside of Ukraine, like they're fighting NATO there, and it looks like the Russian government is once again trying to push that optic towards the public, which is a stupid one. Because if they were fighting the West, they wouldn't have been able to survive 2 years. They would have been obliterated probably within the first year. So I don't really know why they're trying to make it out like that. I think it's so that way the Russian public thinks the war is going for an incredibly long time, and it's an incredibly difficult one because we're fighting the entire Western world as a whole. I believe that's the kind of metric, propaganda-wise, they're going with at the moment. There's really no way to explain the amount of failures and the lack of progress that the Russian armed forces have had in Ukraine over this entire time. But moving on from that little bit of news inside of Moscow and out to the outskirts, we got to see that another fire broke out, this time at an artificial stone plant. We call this Putin's kidney stone, but nevertheless, here's the fire. Well, wait, hang on. Let me make sure I get this correct. Actually, this is an older clip, a duplicate one that they republished as a similar one, so we're going to be deleting that because it appears to be the same building that we geolocated the other day that was actually an administrative building. It appears that it's been relabeled, and that was a misinfo. Moving on from that, however, and into the area of Vladimir, we also got to hear that the Russian war industry, according to TASS, and we're going to get into why it's important who put this out, has ramped up massively since the beginning of the war. I'm going to put y'all through some metrics that TASS put out for us to hear. According to the Russian government, military production output volume has increased for tanks by 3.5 times, lightly armored vehicles by 3 times, ammo for tanks and APCs has increased by a factor of 9, shells for cannon artillery by a factor of 6, rockets for the MLRSs by 8 times an increase. We've also heard that unguided rockets for heavy flamethrowers like the TOSS has increased by a factor of 3, self-propelled artillery has increased by a factor of 10, towed artillery has increased by a factor of 14, mortars have increased by a factor of 20, and the production of MLRSs, brand new ones, has increased by a factor of 2. To be quite honest with y'all, the amount of increases that we've seen here are actually unbelievable over a 2-year span, and also considering that the Russian economy is in a significant downturn, and because of that, the Russian economy is not able to have enough money, the tax base isn't as big, and for that reason, the government doesn't have in Russia the kind of spending power that it even did pre-war. These kinds of production numbers, especially in SPGs, is ludicrous. 10 times an increase. Let's say that the Russians were making about 20 artillery pieces per month, self-propelled artillery pieces alone. Let's just say pre-war they were making 20 of them. According to this, Russia is now making 200 SPGs a month, which is completely fictitious. There's no way that they have enough factories inside of the Russian Federation that could get enough equipment and parts in the first place to be able to produce 200 SPGs, much less for the Russian government to be able to afford to open up brand new factories and to be able to produce this kind of a number. This is absolutely absurd, and these numbers
Also, if they could really ramp numbers up this drastically and basically multiply their production capacity this fast, how come they've been buying stuff off of North Korea and other countries, like desperately trying to get equipment from them, if they could simply just ramp it up at any point they wanted to?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. That's a good point too. If their ammunition production was so great, why are a lot of the shells that the Russians are using these days North Korean? That means that they're not producing the shells, they're buying them from somewhere, and they're buying them from North Korea. Or if they have so much equipment, they just have an endless amount of production abilities, why are they buying drones from Iran? Or why were they buying drones from Iran even up until the present day? None of that makes sense, and it's once again showing that the Russian government is trying to put out a propaganda figure to say that things are going incredibly well. But the problem is that we know that things aren't going incredibly well for the Russian war industry because we continue to see that there are no modern vehicles being introduced into the Ukraine war. They are getting older as time keeps going by. At the beginning of the war, the Russians had nothing but T-72B3s, T-80B VMs, and T-90As. Now we see that they have a very small amount of T-90Ms, an incredibly large amount of T-72Bs, and then they also have an endless amount of T-62Ms. All of this is showing that while they do have at least a very small amount of manufacturing ability for Russian armor, because we do see the T-90Ms have been destroyed in far larger numbers than even existed pre-war, based off of what we had info-wise then, it is showing that they're not able to produce a large amount of tanks in every category and keep the Russian army well supplied. That's something that's clear at this point, and we see that because older tanks keep on appearing on the battlefield in larger numbers. There are no more modern tanks. Most of the Russian tanks that are being used right now are Cold War vintage from the 1960s and 70s, which is letting us know that they are on the death knell as far as the war industry is going. And at the same time, we also know that the Russian government isn't overflowing with money, as we got to see today a particular instance of a Russian mother being paid for the death of their child inside of Ukraine in the Ukraine war. A mother got 500 rubles and a postcard. To put that in perspective,
And that's all the guys are worth over there in Russia. A soldier's only worth 500 rubles. What's that, like $20, $30 or something in USD?
that's $5.
Damn, that's an insult.
It is an insult. This woman got $5, $5 and a postcard for the loss of her son in Ukraine. When you put that out there like that, you know that the Russians are about to be damn dirt poor. They can't even buy chocolate cake and water park tickets anymore. They're just giving away $5 for each dead Russian, and that's it. And that lets you know that the Russian economic situation is so bad, they're pinching pennies to the extreme, pretty much to the point of not even giving anyone compensation for the loss of their kid. And you can also see here the actual post. This is what it said over here, but you can click on that in the link in the description below if you want to see it a little bit better. But this is still giving us an idea. The Russian government is starting to try and fudge the numbers and make things look like they're going incredibly good when they really aren't, because they have an incentive to do that. They have to make it look like to the Russian public that they're fighting the collective West and they're ramping up production in every regard, and the Russian government is trucking along just fine, because they say the reality that things are going poorly and they're expecting to collapse here within the end of this year. The Russian public is going to start freaking out, and that may be a self-fulfilling prophecy that forces the war into ending even earlier than the end of this year. So going off of all of this, the situation in Russia looks pretty damn bad again today. And moving on down into the southern area of the Russian Federation, we then got the big news that the Russian Air Force is in such a bad state as far as their ability to protect the Air Force that they're moving a large amount of them out of the southern area of Russia. Not occupied Ukraine, the southern area of Russia at this point. And we're going to be moving y'all into the information that we got today from the British Ministry of Defense. Over the course of this week, the Ukrainian attack on the Russian airfield Chushevskaya has likely contributed to approximately 40 aircraft of different types being removed from the area and dispersed to multiple airfields further from the front line. You have to remember that Krushevskaya, or Kuvshevskaya, is an incredibly far ways away from the current front lines. This is where Chuvshevskaya is at the moment. That's the airfield right there. And if we were to take a ruler from that and we were to measure the distance from probably the closest area in the front line, which is going to be around Marinka and Novomikhailivka, that means that this airfield is an entire 135 miles away from Ukraine. And according to what we're finding out from the British Ministry of Defense, what they've been able to find out from satellite footage is that all of these aircraft are being moved even further back, away from Ukraine. They're being moved probably towards Krasnodar and maybe even into the area of Volgodonsk, further to the north and east, to try and get them a little bit farther away. And this is showing us that the exclusionary zone where Russian aircraft cannot be stationed at an operational airfield is rapidly growing these days, because back at the beginning of the war, we actually saw that Russian aircraft were actually based out of Dzhankoy, and from the closest area of the active front, and I'll be showing y'all this right here, the closest front line was only 80 miles away, approximately, really 84 if we go right down the middle of the Dnieper River. It was about 84 miles away, and that was about the closest that we ever saw Russian aircraft being stationed to the area of the front line. And that was considered a fairly decent distance. I mean, it's not incredibly close, it's not incredibly far, it's kind of like the Goldilocks zone. But as we've seen that the Ukrainians have systematically been destroying Russian surface-to-air missile sites inside of Ukraine, especially larger ones, and not only that, they've also been targeting and destroying Russian aircraft in larger numbers, not just inside of Crimea, but also inside of Russia as well. it is starting to be deemed that even 140 miles away from the front lines is still too close for the Russian Air Force to be operating from, and they now have to move back even farther. This means
Isn't that funny that they had to move their Black Sea fleet back first? They had to like basically take off and run for their lives to prevent their ships from getting destroyed. And now they're doing the same thing with their air force, man. All their forces are getting pushed back. Like they can't quit running from Ukraine because the distance that Ukraine can strike keeps increasing. It's really crazy to see. They're having to move their whole like infrastructure back.
They're really having to move the entire thing, and it's really crazy to look at that because the further and further the naval and air forces move back and away from Ukraine, the further and further away the ground forces are from any further kind of support, which is really leaving them to be isolated on their own and having to deal with the Ukrainian armed forces pretty much on a one-to-one comparison. There is no advantage that the Russians will be able to levy through the Air Force or through the Navy because the Navy and the Air Force are practically out of the region and have moved on outside of the region. It's a lot like how the A-50 AWACS aircraft that the Russians were using have also pretty much been moved out of theater as well, because originally they flew over the area just south of Berdyansk. They then got shot down, so then they decided to move them over to the area around the village of Novosherbenovskaya, and then they got shot down there as well. And now we don't even hear any reports of Russian A-50s flying anywhere inside the Don or even in the Azov Sea. It appears that they've been completely grounded at this point, and I believe that based off of the prior information that we got, they all were grounded by the Russian Air Force. So going off of all of this, kind of in a big circle, or kind of putting it all together in a big circle, the Russian Air Force is in a bad situation, and they're continuing to get in a worse and worse situation. And now we know that this airfield here, which was heavily used by the Russian Air Force, is now completely empty, and these aircraft have all moved on to other air bases deeper inside of Russia, so that way they're further out of Ukraine's striking range. And so with that, it does appear that the Russian Air Force is starting to leave, and this is something that I gotta say, it's very interesting, because the British Ministry of Defense then rounded out by saying the impact of this is unlikely to be immediately obvious or dramatic, which is always the case with war. However, Ukraine has already demonstrated the ability to strike much further into Russia than these dispersal locations. Forcing such dispersal measures means that the length of sorties will have to increase to maintain the same permanency over the battle space. This will in turn require more fuel, increasing cost, while also placing more strain on the air crews. And probably the thing that the Russians will have a heart attack over the most, people will be falling out of windows over, is that this will require more fuel. And we already know that the Russians do not have more fuel. They're running out of fuel every single day at this point in large amounts. They're literally bleeding fuel. And considering that these sorties are now going to be taking more fuel, this most likely means that in the long run, the Russians are going to have to reduce the overall amount of sorties that they're conducting inside of Ukraine from about 150 to 100, probably down into the 70s or the 50s, so that way they can try and conserve fuel and use the same amount that they were in the past, instead of massively increasing fuel consumption when they already know that rationing and fuel shortages are going to be in the future of the Russian Federation, given several months' time. So going off of all of that, we can see that this is something that is very, very interesting, and showing that the Russians aren't doing that well. But like we were just saying with the whole tank display that's going on in Moscow right now, Ukrainian intel says that Russian forces have been told to capture something for Victory Day on May 9th, so that way they can try and make it look like the Russians are winning somewhere, in some place, so that way they can try and detract from everything else that certainly is not a winning look. A lot of people have said that Russia will most likely try and gain some sort of propaganda victory by taking a place like Chasiv Yar, or maybe pushing even further out and away from Avdiivka, so that way they can say that they were ending up winning massive successes. Some people are saying that Russia will probably only gain nominal territory, maybe some farm fields that don't really have a massive amount of strategic importance to them, but nevertheless will make it look like the Russians are at least gaining some land. Some people are saying that the Russians are going to be pushed back in between now and the 9th of May, and some people are saying that the Russians will most likely remain within a stalemate and will not be able to progress any farther or any forward on the front lines. And everyone has a different opinion on this. It's almost everyone saying something completely different from each other. And so, Matthew, what are people really saying about this, and what are you thinking as well?
So this poll is actually pretty evenly split. Actually, one of our most even polls. It looks like about 29% said Russia will gain a propaganda victory, while another 28% said Russia will remain in that stalemate, and 24% said Russia will gain only nominal territory, and a measly 19% said Russia will be pushed back by May the 9th. And on this one, I personally think that Russia probably will gain a propaganda victory. But it's simply that, once again, it's propaganda. It's not because it's strategic. It's simply something to tell the Russian people, we took something and we must be doing okay. And obviously they have to do that, or otherwise the Russian people might wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, we're losing on the front line. Like, what's going on? Where our sons and our stuff are dying over there in Ukraine, and we're not getting any frontline gains. So they have to get some type of propaganda victory. I believe the Russians will get that at any cost. If it means throwing men between now and the 9th at Ukraine tremendously, they're going to do it. So I think there have been a couple areas along the front line which there have been some minor advancements by Russia, and one of those will probably be pushed in really hard in the next few days, and they'll probably take a small little area, like I said, to claim a propaganda victory. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in my opinion, they are probably going to end up gaining a propaganda victory, because to be quite honest with y'all, we don't really say a lot about this on air, but the Russians are making slow advances in Bakhmut and in the Avdiivka area, but they're doing that at incredibly high losses per day, like we've been seeing in the casualty report. So we believe that either the Russians are going to completely take Ocharatine before May 9th, or they're going to be taking Chasiv Yar before May 9th, one or the other. And it's actually believed by Oleksandr Sersky that the Russians are wanting to capture Chasiv Yar by the 9th of May, so that way they can try and claim some major victory, because Chasiv Yar is the next stepping stone towards the town of Konstantinivka, which is actually about the same size as Bakhmut, I believe, in population, and also it's at the crossroads of several highways that move through the area, meaning that it could serve, at that point, Bakhmut would actually serve as a minor logistics hub for Konstantinivka, which will most likely turn into a major supply hub because it has two different highways feeding into it. But nevertheless, going off of that, I do believe that we will probably see the Russians try and claim a propaganda victory. It's just that they're taking such high losses to do that in the meantime, it really will only be a propaganda victory. Like every battle before, the amount of losses that the Russian forces are sustaining are untenable in the long run. An offending country, or a offensive battle, usually requires a 3-to-1 advantage over your opponent, and the Russians have usually always been able to create that 3-to-1 advantage. But in most modern conflicts, if you want an actual victory that is a victory in every means, not only do you have to have a major numbers advantage over your opponent, you also have to be able to take very little losses while inflicting devastating losses onto the other side. And from what we know, the Russians never get to do anything like that. The Russians are usually the ones taking incredibly high losses in comparison to Ukraine's lower loss numbers. In the Battle of Bakhmut, we believe that the kill-to-death ratio in between the Russians and the Ukrainians was 1 Ukrainian killed for nearly every 6 to 7 Russians that ended up being killed or wounded in the fighting. Well, actually, 1 Ukrainian killed or wounded for every 6 to 7 that were killed and wounded in the fighting. So going off of that, we know that the Ukrainians are winning these battles in the long run, because while they may lose the cities and they may lose the ground that these cities are on, they are inflicting such high casualties that eventually the Russians are going to grind themselves down, continuing to try and push further and deeper into Ukraine. So this once again means the Russians are kind of caught in the catch-22. They can continue to try and feed the Russian public with stories of victories inside of Ukraine, taking a village here and there. But when you really look at it from a strategic aspect and the amount of losses that they've been taking, and how many more remaining armored personnel carriers and tanks that they can put into the war, along with the amount of soldiers that they can train and will be effective, we already know that the Russians will only be able to get a propaganda victory out of this, but they have to have one. Because if they don't have anything good to say by May 9th this year, a lot of the Russian public is going to start realizing that this is a never-ending war, a lot like the war in Afghanistan, and that the Russians should end up withdrawing in the end, because there's going to be nothing to be had or received out of this entire conflict. So with that,
I wonder how much of a victory day it really is. If the Russians will show up on May the 9th and they'll say, "Oh, look, we took a small little place on the front line. We're actually winning, folks. Like, look, we're winning." And meanwhile, like, at least who knows how many, they're losing about 1,000 or 1,200 soldiers a day at this point. That number is probably going to go up a little bit now that they're going to start trying to blitz Ukraine to get that propaganda victory. You're going to have a lot more mothers showing up at Victory Day without their sons being alive as a result of trying to gain that propaganda victory. So it's not going to be much of a victory day, actually, for them.
I would completely agree with that. And also, another interesting thing, Matthew, is that I have been able to find a video, which we are going to play really quickly, that shows the Victory Day Parade rehearsals in St. Peter. Well, actually, no, we want to find the one in Moscow if we can. It doesn't really look like there's a lot of videos on this at the moment, but let me see if there is. Let's see here. What about this? No, that's not really, because we want to see the kind of armor that they're bringing in. And we have the St. Petersburg one, and I think we'll show that just because. And I'll show y'all what they have for their armored section in St. Petersburg this year, because it looks like, to fill in for the complete loss of armor that they've had in the Russian Federation, they're now filling it in literally with just nothing but antiques. We can see the one T-34-85 leading the parade, which is always a standard, by the way. They've always, almost forever, had a T-34-85 at the beginning of the parade, because that's the tank that won World War II in the Russian mind. But after the T-34-85, usually they have a fairly modern set of tanks. There would be like T-72B3s, or T-80s, or T-90s, or T-14 Armadas, especially in Moscow. But this is what the parade is looking like this year in St. Petersburg. So really quickly, we're going to move this forward. I'm actually going to skip forward completely because we have to get to the actual parade segment, or at least the armored column segment. So it looks like they have a T-34-85, a Gaz-66, which is a World War II Russian or Soviet Jeep. They also have a couple of armored cars behind that as well, from about the time of the Great War. These would be BTR 152s, which are ancient in their own right. These are like very, very early Cold War era vehicles. Then followed by, I believe, some sort of amphibious version of the Duck, which we had in the United States. They then have some BRDM2s right here. They also have Katyushas, like the actual proper Katyushas, the old ones from the 50s. This is then followed by a group of UAZ 469s, which are utility cars. They're like the modern version of the Willys Jeep. These are,
Man,
like,
if you didn't know any better, you'd look at this and think you were seeing like 1980 or something like that versus 2024 until you get to these vehicles right here.
yeah, and then they have a few number, I believe, of Tiger armored cars right here, but a very small number of these. And then that's followed by more Tigers. These are actual Tigers. I know those are Tigers. I think the front ones were like Akhmats or something like that. We can see a BTR-82 here. Only one. And then that's followed by another BTR-82, some Ural 4320s with mortars. And then we can see some more modern KAMAZ rolling forward, carrying, I believe, D-20s, which are a fairly old artillery piece. And then we have the Iskander launchers, fairly normal, run-of-the-mill stuff. So it doesn't look like... We have some surface-to-air missile batteries right here. It looks like S-300s. We then have fuel trucks. This is starting to tell us that they're having to pad, because they have fuel trucks in this part of the parade. And you usually don't see those. I don't even think you see those in St. Petersburg most of the time.
For the Russians, for them to have fuel trucks that haven't been blown up, that's something to celebrate at this point. Talking about on Victory Day.
Man, they're like,
oh,
look,
my goodness,
they kept them lit. I mean, it's probably true. It's probably something that they did. But still, it is showing that they are running out of armor. And while they can claim a victory all they want, the Victory Day parades are even showing that armor and vehicles to actually show off at the parades are getting incredibly scarce, to the point that they're pulling out fuel trucks, and not only that, a whole bunch of historic vintage vehicles to try and fill in for the numbers in the parade. And that's really giving us an idea that they are actually running out of numbers on the larger, more modern armored vehicles that would make the Russian Federation look like a modern armed fighting force. But with that, we're now going to be moving on really briefly into some Western news and also a little bit of Middle Eastern news, just to make sure that y'all keep up to date on what's going on down there, because we do expect that to kick off here in the near future. But moving on into the area of Germany and into Berlin, we got to see that the Dial building, or the Dial building, was on fire today. This is the building that is used by the Dial company that produces defense equipment for the Germans. It caught on fire today. We don't know why. We don't know if it was sabotage. We don't know if it was a workplace accident. But fires like these in the West are fairly rare. And it is starting to lead us to believe that there is a rash of sabotage attempts that are happening across the world for the large part.
It's right next to a Volkswagen dealership as well. But also, fun fact, Enforcer, we actually have a Dial Aerospace manufacturing facility actually about 20 miles down the road in a neighboring town, actually. It's out there in the middle of nowhere.
Really? That's incredibly cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're actually out there. I think they're. I don't even actually. I have no idea why they're in Alabama. Like, it's kind of a good question. Like, why out of all places they're going to go to the middle of nowhere in Alabama, out in the middle of the woods, and set up like they have a huge like barbed wire fence around it. It says Dial Aerospace on the front of it, and it's staffed every day of the week. It's kind of wild.
Huh. Hang on, I want to find this place now. Let's type in Dial and stare it.
Yep, that's them.
Oh, no way. Yeah, we've actually driven by this place, I think, a good amount of times. Let me see.
Yeah, I think they're fabricating parts there or something like that. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, dude, we've driven by this place a million times. I'll drop y'all down on Street View so y'all can see this. So that's Dial
Yep, that's
Aerospace,
it.
right there.
Not their most proud facility, like when it comes to like how nice the one is in Germany, but it's good enough for Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, dude, this is wild, man. I actually completely forgot about this because I remember we've driven by this before and we're like, why is there a German flag in front of this building out here in the middle of nowhere? And now it explains it because Dial is a German company, but still, that is whack. That's really weird. I mean, you wouldn't believe that that's out in the middle of Sterrett, Alabama, because that's literally the middle of nowhere here in Alabama. There's Sterrett, which really doesn't exist as a town. And then there's Harpersville, which is a one intersection town right down here. And then you have Childersburg, which is really like the first actual like sizable-ish town in the area. And then way down from there is Sylacauga, which is like the only like proper town in the area. The rest of them, I would say, are more village or large village sized, if you were to talk about this in a European metric. But still, that is weird. I mean, like, that is actually crazy to think about that. But nevertheless, it does appear that a rash of sabotage attempts are starting to happen throughout the world, in the Western world, and it appears that this may start causing a little bit of some issues as far as production and providing equipment to Ukraine is concerned. But at the same time, while that's happening up in Germany, we were able to hear that down in Italy, Italy may be possibly providing Ukraine with a brand new TSAM air defense system. The system is able to provide ballistic missile and long-range air defense coverage, and will reportedly be included in an aid package that will be sent by Italy in the future. Here is a picture of the SAMP-T surface-to-air missile system in, I believe, Iraq, if I'm correct, or Afghanistan. I'm not really sure. But still, very interesting system, and hopefully this will be helping once again to shore up Ukraine's air defenses and make sure that they have a strong shield over their skies to protect everything that is deeper inside of Ukraine from Russian attacks in the future. But moving on from that little bit of news in Italy and on back into the Middle East really quickly, we were also able to hear, and this requires a little bit of exposition because we didn't include this in the news because I thought this wasn't going to be that important, but Turkey actually sanctioned Israel and completely barred trade with Israel on their own. That means that Turkish businesses and companies can no longer trade or conduct any kind of business with Israel. For the large, well, actually, there are some instances where they can, but over the blanket statement, they are no longer able to conduct business with Israel. Israel has now done the same in turn today and has sanctioned Turkey and has decided that they're no longer going to be conducting business with the Turks. This is once again a part of a very convoluted power struggle in the region, as Israel and Turkey are part of the Western sphere. Turkey is a part of NATO. Israel is a integral member state of really the Western sphere inside of the Middle East, which is comprised of Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and Oman. And from what we can see, it does appear that the Turks are once again doing Turkey things. To explain why they're doing this, let's see. I'm not going to talk about the history. I'm trying to figure out what I'll talk about and explain what's going on right now. Because a lot of people are going to say that the Turks are bastards, and they're not. It's just how things are running right now. So I'm going to completely forgo the whole 100 years of Turkish history from Ataturk up until the modern day. I'm just going to tell you what's going on right now. Erdogan is trying to pose himself as being the next leader of the Middle East. This largely has to do a lot with the dissolution of the Islamic Caliphate at the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which left a massive question in the Islamic world, specifically inside the Middle East, about what are they from that point. And that's been a question that they've been trying to answer ever since then, and it's come in many different forms. In the earlier part of the 20th century, the Middle East largely decided that going with a very forward Western kind of a mindset, was probably the way forward for all of them. But then that started to change near to the 1970s when radical Islamics started to appear inside the Middle East, and that's when you would see that things would start to change. There would be the overthrowing of the Shah, the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and also there was a thing that happened a little bit later, kind of as a continuation of that change that started to happen in the 70s and the 80s, called the Arab Spring of the 2010s. And this is the kind of world right there that not Ataturk, but Erdogan rose to power inside of Turkey, because Turkey is completely separate from the ebbs and flows societally in the rest of the Middle East because of Ataturk way back in the day. And that means that Turkey historically is a lot more secular and honestly a lot more French in the way they operate than the rest of the Middle East is, even when they were going with the experimental ideas that they had back in the early 20th century. And so this has completely removed Turkey over the past century from anything that goes on in the Middle East socially, even if it has to do with Islam, although Turkey is a largely Islamic country. But now in the modern day, Erdogan is trying to pose Turkey as kind of the successor state to the Ottoman Empire, at least on a religious level, and that Turkey can be the protectors, or at least the leaders, of the Islamic world inside the Middle East. So while they're a Western-aligned country, and they do end up supporting Western interests in some instances, Erdogan is trying to position Turkey to be the next leader of the Islamic world. That would actually kind of be a little bit beneficial for the West, because it is a Western-aligned country, so it would probably put a lot of control on what's going on in the Middle East, but that also means that Turkey is now butting heads with Western interests inside of the region. And that is also why we see that they're sanctioning Israel right now, because they don't want to look like they're aligned with Israel, because, as many of y'all will know, a lot of the Islamic countries are either indifferent to Israel or unfriendly to them on an ideological standpoint, while they may be friendly with them on a diplomatic aspect. And for that reason, the Turks are sanctioning them so that way they'll position themselves in the Islamic world of the Middle East to look more like a power that could lead them, or look out for their best interests. That's kind of what's going on at the moment, and we do not talk about religion on this channel. I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just trying to explain the ebb and flow of why Turkey does Turkey things. And also this has a lot to do with economics, because becoming the leader of the Islamic world inside the Middle East means that a lot of Middle Eastern countries are going to turn to them not only to be a religious or an ideological leader for the large part, but also an economic leader as well, which means that the Turks are going to poise themselves to be an economic power in the future, not just in the Middle East, but also within the Balkans and also in the area of Ukraine, because those are also areas that they're getting largely involved in as well, with the amount of investing that they're conducting, the amount of support that they're giving. That is kind of the way Turkey works. And so I can't say this, because I see some people saying the things I knew they would say because I didn't explain the whole history of Turkey from beginning to end to try and give context. Turkey is not a bad country. Turkey is actually a fairly solid country as far as countries in this region of the world go. They're probably one of the best, and they're also one of the most armed as well, one of the larger members of the NATO alliance as far as their armed forces is concerned. But at the same time, because of the modern political landscape in Turkey, which I'm not here to say is good or bad, I'm just going to tell y'all that it is what it is and exists. They are doing things that are in their best interest, even when they're not in the interest of the rest of the Western world, and also when they're not in the best interest of the Western world inside the Middle East. So that's kind of the best way that I can explain that at the moment. And also another thing is that Turkey doesn't lean hard into the Islamic leadership kind of a thing when dealing with other countries, like Ukraine and countries in the Balkans. They actually don't get into that at all with them. They just go, hey, look, we're great friends with y'all, and we could all make money, right? Here, let me invest in your country a little bit. That'll help you out a great deal. And that's how they deal with countries in the Balkans and also in with Ukraine, because Ukraine is a largely Eastern Orthodox country, and the Balkans are as well. So they can't go with the same kind of mindset to draw in those countries that they do with the Middle East, so they go with a completely different sales pitch for those folks. It really has nothing to do with Turkey trying to, I guess you could say, be the next Iran or anything like that. That's not at all what they're doing inside the Middle East. They're trying to build themselves up to be an economic power by becoming a trading power in the area, and also the country that everyone kind of looks for in the region to do something. Kind of like how France is trying to pose themselves within Western Europe to really do the exact same thing. So I hope that explains that the best I can, because that's what's going on down here. in reality, don't expect the Turks to do anything whack. They're not going to do anything against Israel in the long run, because that would be so against Western interests that they would probably receive a decent amount of sanctions against them, even from inside of NATO and the European Union and so on. But nevertheless, it is showing that they're still trying to do these moves that are showing that they would be a leader of the region. And also another thing that's kind of leading us into something else interesting is that they're only doing this because Israel has said they're going to be invading southern Lebanon. And that is once again showing us that that is certainly going to happen at this point, because now the Turks are sanctioning them over that. So we do know that war is once again on the horizon in the region, and Israel is going to invade southern Lebanon, and now it's just a matter of waiting it out, and really just a matter of waiting for the clock to tick down and the invasion to begin. And so
I gotta say though, good on Israel though for firing back with their own sanctions on Turkey, because I understand what Turkey's trying to do politically, but at the same time though, I really don't understand what Turkey's trying to do when it comes to who they're trying to buddy up with, because obviously, like you said, they are Western aligned, and it's so complicated because Turkey's such a wild card here. But who is Turkey trying to align with in the Middle East to get influence over? Unless they're trying to align with their adversaries like Iran or something like that to have influence over them. I'm not sure really what they're trying to do here, because they already have a pretty good bit of influence in the area, just among the places where they're bordering up to. So why they're going at odds directly at Israel for the hell of it, I think it's solely motivated because of religious differences, honestly.
The reason why they're doing this, and I'll explain what countries they're trying to pull in. They're trying to pull in Syria, Iraq, and also a couple of other countries within the Middle East. Not Iran, not Iran. They actually hate Iran and they fight Iran, and they also obliterate the Kurds in southern Turkey. And I'll also explain, because some people are going to be like, what the hell do you mean? Like, they're obliterating Kurds. That's not a pro-Western thing. That's an anti-Western thing, because the Kurds are on our side. Not the case. The Kurds are on our side in northern Iraq and also in northern Syria. But in southern Anatolia, it's completely different. The Turks are actually against, the Kurds are actually against Turkey, and the Iranians actually fund those Kurds and arm those Kurds, so that way they can conduct terrorist operations against Turkey. So Turkey is not on good terms at all with Iran. Not a single bit. They actually hate each other a great amount. But what Turkey is trying to do is, in the next 10 to 20 years, they're trying to pull in every country around them into being a major trading partner with them, and also having the Turks heavily tied into each of their economies. So that way they're skimming a little bit of money off of all the countries around them because of how heavily involved they are with them economically. And that's why Turkey invaded Syria back in the day, to try and make it look like kind of like Syrians down the middle inside of Syria that aren't a part of the Syrian Democratic Forces or the Assad regime. Hey, look, we can look out for y'all's best interests and create safety zones, so that way we're looking out for y'all. And then with Iraq, they also try and do some things. It's a very weird thing that they do with Iraq. They try and do some things, but at the same time, they don't really do a lot with them. But they're still trying to pull them into a Turkish economic fold as well. And then in the Balkans, they actually do a lot of funding, investing into industries and economies in this region. So that way, those governments will end up being economically tied a lot more to Turkey than to, say, the rest of the European Union. That's also what they've been doing in Ukraine, because if you haven't noticed, Matthew, Turkey has been providing and offering a lot of free stuff to Turkey, well, actually to Ukraine over the course of the war. Free Baykar drones, free ships, economic investments. They've been doing that a lot over the course of the war, because they're also trying to get their foot tied in with Ukraine as well, because once the war is over, and once Ukraine wins, where is all of Ukraine's maritime traffic going to go? Straight through Turkey, right through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to get out into the rest of the world. So if they can tie
is most of it really free though? Because I think Turkey's private industries have been selling most of that equipment to Ukraine at their normal profits. So have they really given much free to Ukraine at this point? Because I really haven't seen that.
They have. Way back at the beginning of the war, the Turkish government actually subsidized a load of Bayraktars to give to Ukraine for free. It was dozens of them. And they've also subsidized the production of, I believe, 2 brand new Corvettes for the Ukrainian Navy as well, that the Ukrainians aren't paying for. The Turks are paying for it. And they're doing it out of a gesture of goodwill. And it's entirely so that way when the war ends, not only does Ukraine owe a debt of gratitude to the Turks for helping them to win the war, but they also owe a bit of money to Turkey because of all the economic investments that Turkey is making on the side inside of Ukraine as well. It's all a part of trying to draw in the Balkans, Ukraine, and parts of the Middle East into really viewing Turkey as its own mini-sphere in the region, and kind of reforming the Ottoman Empire, at least economically, because the land areas that Turkey is trying to draw in economically are all parts of the former Ottoman Empire, parts of the Middle East, parts of the Balkans, and also small parts of, well, really the whole of Ukraine now, but back in the day it would have been small parts of Ukraine, like some areas in Crimea. But that's kind of the play that's going on. It's like, to talk about the Middle East, it's not, there is a good and evil in the Middle East. Iran are the bad guys. The West is the good guys, and the good guys in the West really just operate through Israel, whether you like them or not. That's, kind of like the home base of the good guys inside of the Middle East at the moment on the ongoing conflict. But beyond that, the Middle East is an incredibly complicated region. Each country looks at things completely differently. They're doing their own things, and while things end up looking similar from one country to the other on how they're doing things in the region, it's all for different end goals. And so that's the best way.
I just think honestly, to me, this is just in my personal opinion. If I was trying to strategize for the West how to deal with Turkey, my goal would be to prevent Turkey from getting too much influence in the Middle East, because the way Turkey behaves, which is not too unusual for Turkey, I want to make that clear. I'm not saying they're suddenly changing or anything like that, but Turkey is always sort of ridden the fence. And in my opinion, they're at risk for potentially falling off onto the wrong side if they gain too much influence and they realize they can team up with maybe our adversaries if it benefits them financially. Turkey's at a major risk of doing that, in my opinion. And to let them get too much influence would be a mistake. And I think we should stay very heavily aligned with Israel instead and not try to split our interests between Turkey and Israel whatsoever to make sure we can maintain control over what we want in the region.
Oh, I would agree with that completely. But at the same, it's a complicated thing, because if we look at it from the Turkish perspective, this may end up being as good as the Israeli end goal, because the Israelis are going to end up knocking out Hezbollah and Hamas by the end of this. We know that for sure. They're also going to most likely target and knock out a good amount of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and will probably end up knocking out Iranian nuclear research sites by the time this is all over. We know those things will most likely be a certainty, because Israel is trying to goad Iran into striking at them again, so that way they can justify the Iranians being the aggressors that they are, but they can have that as a public justification, and then start striking them heavily in sensitive locations. If the Turks do what they want, they would start to most likely corral a lot of the Middle East to view them favorably, and then a Western country that is a part of NATO that is fairly secular in the way they operate with Islam, because the Turkish way that Islam is conducted inside of Turkey is literally completely different than every other part of the Middle East. If they ended up becoming kind of the sayer and doer of things in the Middle East, things in the Middle East might actually end up dying down and stabilizing down that route as well. It's just that the Iranians will most likely still continue to develop nuclear weapons, and not only that, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hamas, and Hezbollah may all end up still existing by the end of that, which means that the West didn't really do anything to crush Iran or its soft power in the region, but we were able to at least quell a lot of the tensions and conflict that is constantly ongoing over there by the Turkish route. So there are some pros and cons down both routes. I still think that the Israeli one is the better route to go with at the moment for the West, but I hope that does address that at least the best we can. But we have to make sure to stay back on the Ukraine war news, because I just wanted to give you all a quick little rundown on what's going on in the Middle East as this mosquito is flying around me trying to suck my blood.
Mosquito?
Hot Dog Man has arrived. But beyond that, we do have a little bit of a question to ask y'all about what's been going on with France again, because we all know that France is still out there and kind of on the table as a hot topic. And a lot of people have been talking about Macron's offer to put troops in Ukraine and Britain allowing weapon use in Russia, and what this is starting to mean as far as the West is concerned, at least as far as Western Europe is concerned. Does it look like the West is preparing to intervene in the conflict? Does it look like they believe that Ukraine is losing, or they're bluffing Russia? What do y'all think about that? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what do you think about that as well?
All right, so the question is, what are your thoughts on Macron's offer to put troops in Ukraine, and also Britain allowing weapons to be used on Russia that they provided to Ukraine? It looks like 64% said the West is preparing to intervene, while only 16% said the West thinks Ukraine is losing, and 15% said the West is bluffing Russia, while 6% said the West wants to start World War III. And I think one thing we can be very confident about at this point is the West has pretty much done everything they can, in fact, going above and beyond to try to prevent World War III from occurring. In fact, at points, I think we've been a little bit cowardly with trying to prevent a world war from breaking out, which there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes it is time to step up. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but that's just my opinion. But I will say that it does seem like the West is making preparations to potentially intervene in the future, but I still have some doubts about Macron's statements about him actually putting troops in Ukraine. I'm not sure if he'd actually do that in the way he's describing it. They may send advisors or something like that, but I'll have to wait and see if Macron's actually really serious about his statements. But the fact that Britain is allowing weapons to be used on Russia itself now on the mainland, that is a much bigger thing to me, because now Britain's basically saying you can use our stuff to strike right at Putin directly. And that's a big statement to make by Britain. And Putin was not happy about that today. And who cares what he thinks, but, you know, he wasn't happy. So it's good to see as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think the West is preparing to start getting a lot more active in the war, not directly intervening at the moment, but they're certainly moving towards that. Well, yeah, they're preparing to intervene. Really, it's going to be a lot longer than just this year, maybe next year if it drags on into next year. But it looks like they are getting ready to intervene, because the British have made a massive move forward in allowing the British weapons, Western weapons really, to be used inside of Russia. And France is continuing to make it quite clear that the French army may get involved in the future directly on the ground in the conflict. So going off of that, I would have to say, it does appear that the West is preparing to intervene, and it looks as though they may be trying to force an end to the war if it just keeps dragging on, even if it means going head-to-head with the Russian Federation, which has nuclear weapons. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, another thing I think is a little bit interesting about this is that going head-to-head with the Russians does mean that if the West ended up obliterating them in Ukraine, there is the possibility they may use nuclear weapons. I think that one thing that will largely assure the lack of a use of nuclear weapons is if there is some sort of a agreement that is made at the beginning of the war that Russia will not move the war outside of Ukraine, the West will not push the war into Russia if the Russians get all the way pushed back out of Ukraine, and no matter what, the West is not going to demand, if we were to push the Russians out in a peace treaty, for there to be a government change in Russia. Those kinds of assurances would most likely guarantee that a nuclear war of any kind, either a tactical or a strategic exchange, would never happen, and we would be able to probably see that we would end up achieving our goals in the area. Because the only thing that would probably get the Russians to launch nukes at this point is if it looks like the Russian government itself is actually in jeopardy of ceasing to exist. And so as long as we were able to tell them, because, you know, of course we would want the central Russian government to eventually cease to exist, but we wouldn't do it directly. We would do it through subversion, because then they couldn't nuke us. So, you know, we just sit there and tell them, we're not going to overthrow your government or anything like that. We're not going to push the war into Russia, but we are getting involved. If you understand that and you know that, don't launch nuclear weapons, because then you're going to be escalating this drastically when it doesn't need to be. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it is now time for us to move on. And also, Matthew, there is really a lot of bots in the comments. One second, I got to go get that one. Someone said, everything you say is wrong. Well, let me help you to go find someone that says something that is right by getting you out of here. But with that, it is now time for us to move on into the rest of the Ukraine war news, because we have a lot of it. But before we get into it specifically, we do have several questions. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so real quick, let me get rid of one person out of the chat. The lunatic showed back up again, but he's now gone. But anyways, moving on to our first question of the night. We have a $50 donation from guess who? Howard Turgell. And thank you very much, Howard, for that very generous support and for keeping the channel running. And also, by the way, that is Howard's first ever super chat from Canada. So huge shout out to you, Howard, for that. He says, peace and kindness are free.
And I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, Howard Turgell, in helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for your first super chat ever. That is absolutely incredible, and I got to thank you greatly for enjoying this channel enough to help us to keep this thing running, because we run this thing ad-free and sponsor-free, and viewer support is the only way we can keep this thing running, so I got to thank you massively for that and helping us to make this thing a reality. Also, peace and kindness are free. Well, kindness is free, but peace is not free. Peace takes a lot to achieve. And this is one thing that I always say, is that the natural state of the world is a constant state of war. It is actually incredibly rare at any point in history that there was not an ongoing conflict. And so to explain what I mean, World War One happens. Well, better yet, let's just go over the past 20 years. So we invade Afghanistan in 2001, and starting from there, the war in Afghanistan goes on literally up until 2021. Then, while that's going on, the invasion and occupation of Iraq happens, the Arab Spring then happens, and there's an ongoing civil war inside of Syria. The Sudanese civil war happens, and now there's a war in Sudan, another Sudanese civil war. Let's see here. What else? There are ongoing wars inside of in Western Africa. There's also wars inside of Burma currently because there's a civil war going on there. There's also ongoing conflicts in between Philippines and the MILF. We also know that there's ongoing conflicts in between India and China on the border, with people beating each other to death with clubs. We also know that there has been small artillery exchanges in between India and Pakistan in the meantime. There's also been conflicts in the Middle East as well. Let's see, what else? Let me think. Let's see, there's ongoing unrest inside of Haiti, and it's almost a state of civil war down there as gangs vie for control of the country. Barbecue do be cooking. We also know that there is ongoing situations as well inside of Brazil as Colombia continues to try and fight the cartel's control. The Mexicans are also trying to deal with the cartel's control inside of Mexico as well with the federal police, which is an ongoing state of conflict. And that is just over the past 20 years. And those are the conflicts that I can think of off of the top of my head. And there's an endless amount of them that I'm not thinking of at the moment that have been going on as well. Also, the Chechen wars, the Georgian war. Let's see, what else? The Turkish conflicts against the Kurds inside of southeastern Anatolia. The Iraqis fighting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and other groups inside of northern Iraq. Let's see, the Yemeni Civil War. What else? The problems with the pirates in Somalia. Dang, I'm really starting to run out of ideas here of what's been happening over the past 20 years. But a lot has happened. And I would agree with you that kindness is free, but peace takes a lot to maintain. It is actually almost an impossible thing to maintain a everlasting or a very successful peace. And I believe that leaders that are able to manage a country in peacetime are truly some of the most amazing leaders. It's not really the ones who lead nations through wartime. They do an incredible job as well. But the ones who are able to somehow maintain peace, but also assure that the peace isn't being received at the cost of everything, those are truly some incredible leaders right there. For example, Calvin Coolidge was a fairly good president. No one really had anything bad to say, although some people do blame the Great Depression on him, but that's a whole other thing. He was a fairly good leader, led the United States during peacetime, didn't really, just give up stuff for free to try and keep peace, but fairly good leader overall. People like that that are completely not mentioned because they just were presidents during peacetime and nothing really happened to remember them by. That is something really impressive. Those folks did something that historically is almost next to none. It's actually a very unnatural state for the world to be in. And that's why you have to greatly appreciate peace when it's here, because peace is very rarely here. And a lot of people always say, why not just end wars around the world? Why not just have a world without war? It is an impossible world to live in. And a lot of people who say that, I believe, are always maybe a step removed from how things really work out there, because the quality of life that many people have inside of their country has been brought to them by war. It's on the shoulders of war. Like the United States wouldn't be able to have the massive amount of economic power that we've had over the past 70 to 80 years, and not only that, the amount of prosperity, the purchasing power, and the quality of life we have, if it was not for us constantly being in some sort of a war and trying to make sure that we maintain our sphere so that we can get all of these resources at cheap prices, or be the ones to be able to actually access those resources to be able to produce or consume the things that we consume. If it was not for us constantly being in a war and being able to maintain this, we wouldn't have it today. And so, with that, I thank you so much for the support, Howard, and I thank you for throwing it in, because it would be a nice world if peace was free. I personally don't believe it is, based off of what I've seen and how the world works, but kindness is certainly free, and I believe that everyone ought to try and be as kind as they possibly can be, because otherwise it's just a constant state of turmoil and conflict, like the natural state of things really is. And so with that, Thank you so much once again for that incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you helped make it possible, and thank you so much once again for supporting the channel for the first time ever. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, our second super chat, the first segment, goes to Kevin, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Kevin, for that support. That is very generous of you. He says, Canada originally wanted a provision in the NATO Charter that would allow for removal of members, and that Turkey has been an example of conflict in the coalition that may have been a use of such a provision.
And I gotta thank you for the massive amount of support, Kevin. And that is really interesting that NATO doesn't actually have a way to kick out members. I think the reason why we don't have a way to kick out members is because if they're doing something on a diplomatic level, as long as they're not acting militarily against the rest of NATO, it wouldn't really matter. I guess is the way they look at it, because it is a military defensive alliance. It doesn't really move over that much into being a diplomatic alliance or anything like that. It's more so just about, we all recognize we're going to be buddy-buddies, and if a war breaks out, we're all going to defend each other buddy-buddy-like. That's really what it all comes down to in the end. So I guess at the beginning, when they wrote the charter, the prevailing opinion was, no one's going to end up conflicting with each other in NATO, so why would we need to ensure that we could kick members out? Because it's not something we were concerned about. And now it does seem that that is changing a little bit. Like, for example, with Hungary blocking the ascension of some NATO members, that would be something that would probably put them on the chopping block if there was a way to kick members out. Kind of like with what Turkey's doing in the Middle East. But then again, Turkey and what they're doing in the Middle East isn't really NATO's concern. NATO is more so concerned about the situation in Eastern Europe. That's kind of what the entire alliance was built upon. But Turkey is a part of that alliance. They are a part of NATO, but it's more so just going against Western interests in general. Not really NATO interests, but Western interests in the Middle East. And then it kind of begs the question, is it worth kicking them out over? I would say maybe, because this is a serious part of the world. This is where most of the oil is produced. And so going off of that, I would have to say it probably is, because it has a lot to do with the global stability. But it's a really tough one to answer, because Turkey is in a very advantageous position. It's why they were in NATO in the first place. They control the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, which are major waterways to be able to control in the area. It can completely block the Russians from being able to enter or leave the Black Sea. Not only that, it is also at a major crossroads in the world as well, being pretty much in the Middle East. It is an important place to have a NATO member, an actual permanent NATO member. So I would have to say, in my honest opinion, most likely it wouldn't be a good idea to kick him out, at least to me. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you so much once again for the support. But it's just a really tricky thing with Turkey. Matthew, do you think anything on Turkey? Do you think that this would be grounds to kick them out, or do you think they should stay in as well?
I wouldn't say to kick them out, because we need to keep Turkey in our sphere of influence as long as we can. But I also, like I said earlier, would not give them any extra leeway to start gaining any more influence in the region if we can prevent that. Because, like I said, they're at risk for flipping over to the wrong side. But I would not go as far as kicking them out, because that would basically accelerate the outcome that we don't want to happen by allowing them to gain influence. So that's pretty much where I stand on it.
Interesting point. Interesting point indeed. And with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, Kevin, and thank you so much once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you help to make this thing possible, and if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again for that incredible support in making this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the Ukrainian frontline news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Babylonian, who puts in a $27 donation. And thank you very much, Babylonian, for that very generous support. And they said, thank you from Coquitlam, BC, Canada.
And hello to Coquitlam, BC, Canada. I hope I said that correct. I don't know if I did. Matthew got a laugh out of that, so I'm guessing that it may have been wrong. But beyond that, I think that's Coquitlam. Coquitlam. Let me go see if I can type that in. Coquitlam, BC, Canada. Dang, that is way over. That is actually in Vancouver. So let's go and take a look at what this looks like. We see a lot of parking lots. A lot of parking lots. It looks like a mall. Oh, wow. This place is really nice, actually. Oh, look at that. Dude, no way. They have mass transit. That is cool. Well, you don't see that a lot in North America.
Is it?
Look at that. It's freaking mass transit.
Is it, man?
Cresse. And they also have Cactus Club Cafe. Looks like it's straight out of Fallout. But beyond that, I gotta say, really cool. Really nice. I like this place. This looks like a nice place. The place where things would be bussin'. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you, Babylonian, for really enjoying this channel and wanting to see it keep on running. Because folks like you who support the channel make it possible. I say this a lot, and I say this like a broken record, but I always want y'all to know how appreciative and thankful we are of each and every one of y'all supporting the channel. This channel does not run any ads or sponsors on these live streams, and it really is the only way that we can end up running this channel is through y'all's support. And I can't thank folks like you enough, Babylonian, and everyone else who supported the channel tonight, and everyone else who's here tonight, for always having the best interests for this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because y'all help to make it possible for us to be on air and get to talk about the stuff we talk about each and every day. And so with that, thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel, and thank you for finding it worthwhile to support. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the Ukrainian frontline news. And moving on to our first clip, we got to hear that apparently the Ukrainians are going to be getting some drones that have guns mounted on board. This is apparently going to be provided by the American company Felony Arrow, and they're calling this thing the Felon 1.0. And this thing is going to be conducting some felonies on the Russians. It appears to be a belt-fed AR style rifle that is put on the bottom of a drone, and it will fly up there, and it will provide machine gun support. So overall, pretty interesting, pretty unique. The barrel length on this thing looks quite short, though, I'm not going to lie. Based off of how big an AR is, this drone can't be too big, and it can't really carry that much ammo, but still, it looks like an interesting concept, and maybe we'll see this thing in Ukraine here in the near future. But moving on...
I gotta say, man, that's pretty sick. Like, putting a whole gun on the bottom of that drone, that is sick.
That is pretty good. It's like something from a video game, honestly. But moving on from that and on into our next bit of news, we also got to see that the Ukrainians are starting to use anti-drone nets near their trenches. Check it out. Oh. And we can see the net all around the trench walls. Look at it.
Павучки. Павучки. Наплыли. Проти нанотехнологічних дронів.
You hear a little explosion in the distance as they continue to show up the trench line.
Бойові павуки. Накатав вже павутиння.
I see that guy, I think he got caught in it. So it looks like it's working.
Ми тепер не бойові кроти, ми бойові павуки. Наплили. павутиння.
And that's the end of that clip. But goodness gracious, I gotta say that this is really interesting to see, and I absolutely love to know and see that the Ukrainians are starting to look a lot like spiders the way they lay out their nets. In the meantime, we also got to see the Russians playing around with some different kinds of munitions. So here's the clip.
Блять, даже не знаю, что сказать. Армейские будни, блять, часть хуй знает какая. Итак, так как, блять, на воде нахуй боев очень мало, принято решение установить на торпедную установку на танк. Снарядов дохуища, но они не заряжены. Что делается, блядь? Берется мина, ТМ, противо, блядь, танковая. Оно, блядь, вот это тротил.
We see here them showing off some rocks.
Мало точка. Сидишь, хуячишь, как долбоёб. Потом эту фракцию берется, трамбуется, блядь, вот так.
Nice music in the background, I'm telling you.
Are they packing rocks into this?
Looks like it.
Huh.
Количество
And they're playing some of that lo-fi hip-hop Russian in the background.
Никакие там формулы, хуёрмул, там зарядов, никакого.
We put some Russian, блядь. They start pulling them out and packing them into another rocket.
Покажи, что дальше ты делаешь. Дальше берется пластид, нах, и залепляется.
Разбирается Горыныч.
Горыныч, вы тоже проходили эту тему. Так, вот это все туда, чик, и опять трамбуется. Все, ставится нахуй на танк и, блядь, летит нахуй фашистские окопы. Вот так. Заебись.
And there's the system that they're actually using right there, and that's the end of the clip. But I don't know what the hell they were doing. They were fitting rocks in the front of a rocket. I don't know how to explain that. But we're going to be moving on from that into our next clip, where we got to see a whole bunch of Ukrainian pickup trucks training with their Maxim guns, the dual-mounted Maxim guns, which are really cool to see. I absolutely love this. It looks classic, and it's also fairly effective as well. These machine guns are really good, although they're incredibly old. They are water-cooled, and in an anti-air defense role, they're honestly perfect for the role. Moving on from that, we can see them, I believe, filling it up with... No, actually, they're changing out the actual ammunition for the machine guns. And we can also see here the 7.62x5R rounds that this machine gun shoots. Really cool. We also got to see them shooting a what appears to be an RP-46, which is a belt-fed version of the DP-28, I believe, and also a Dishka, the heavy machine gun of the Russian Federation, or really the Soviet Union, and now really just everyone else in the rest of the world that's in Eastern Europe. But still, pretty cool to see. Absolutely wonderful, and I love to know that they are making sure to do their thing and do quite well at it. But moving on from that into the Russian casualty report, we also got to see that the losses were incredibly high. Oh!
5 Bobcats, man. That's tremendous. I love to see it. Like that guy over there on the right said, more!
More! And 5 Bobcat skid steers were completely knocked out and destroyed over the past 24 hours, which is unbelievable. Not only that, 1,270 Russian troops were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 33 armored personnel carriers, 42 supply trucks, 22 main battle tanks, 58 artillery pieces, 19 drones, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 5 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, the numbers are absolutely staggering in these categories and are once again showing that the Russians are taking extremely high losses for very little gains right now in the war. And I will say that the Russians are making gains. From what we understand, they are moving forward on separate parts of the front line, but these are the kind of losses that they're having to take to sustain any kind of small forward movement, which is an untenable kind of a position for the Russians to be in. Moving on from that and on into the area of the front lines, we got to see that in the northern area today, a Russian BMP did not get lucky twice. We got, I don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's music playing in the background, but we can see here the BMP racing through the field in like triple, quadruple speed. It runs over one mine, it's fine, so it keeps on going, but then it runs over a second and far more powerful mine right here. And it's gone. So it looks like it didn't get lucky twice. And with that, I gotta say, that is very interesting to see and wonderful to know that the Russians push their luck until they run out of it. We also got to see some Russians in the same area of the front line ending up getting hit by some cluster rounds right here. And, ooh, not that good, the blade. But still, knocked them out, knocked them clean. I gotta say, very nice to see. Moving on from that and down out of that area and into the area of Torske and Kremenna, we also got to see that the Ukrainians had an unsuccessful drone launch today. Y'all will see why.
Oh no. Oh, damn.
Oh. No one was wounded or killed in this incident, but that was probably the closest they ever got to it. What happened was that the drone accidentally released the grenade that was being strapped in by the bomb release, and so it ended up dropping literally as soon as the drone took off. You can see that right there. And you can actually see the fuse on the grenade lighting right there as well, letting you now know that grenade is live. So, pretty close call. Lucky no one got wounded or killed, and a pretty funny video to look back at now, knowing that no one really did get wounded or killed. But moving on from that and out of the Kremenna Forest and down towards Bakhmut, we also got to see that near Bodanivka, a T-90M got completely knocked out today. And here's the clip. We see that T-90M rolling forward on the front line. And we can see it get hit. And we can now see the T-90M getting hit again, so they can make sure that's doubly knocked out. And then hit a third time, so that way it's triply knocked out and quadruply knocked out. And quintuply knocked out, and I don't even know, sextuply knocked out, and octuply knocked out. 8 drones have hit this T-90M now. It is going to be down and out for the count. But with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Wonderful to see. We love to see it. I cannot say that enough, and good to know that another T-90M got knocked out today. Moving on from that and into the area of Orlivka, we also got to see that a Mamont drone was destroying Russian positions. We were literally just one letter off from greatness. It could have just had an R in the word, and it would have been Marmot. But here's the clip. But anyways, we can see the drone coming in on the Russians. It's about to hit the house. It hits the house, and the house caves in. And bada boom, baby! Igor! And we can now see the house burning that the Russians were in. And that's the end of the clip, but wonderful to see that they were able to obliterate the position and make sure to remind the Russians that they're once again not welcome in Ukraine and the visa has expired. Moving on from that and down to the area of Krasnoorivka, we got to see that the Russians got hit on the slag heap today. We're going to have to mute that because it has probably copyrighted music in it. But we can see here the slag heap, which is right on the other side of the Avdiivka coke plant. The slag heap is largely the only part left that is visible of Chris's mom. And we see the drone here surveying the slag heap and inspecting it for Russian forces. And we see it continuing to look around. And looking around some more. And even a little bit more. And just looking around the entire area. We see them continuing to look at the slag heap. And we see them continuing to show it. It's really just a large mass of slag. And slag is a industrial byproduct of steel production, I believe. And we can see the coke plant right over there. That's where Hot Dog Man gets his fix. Aw, man. It takes an entire factory to keep me snorting. But anyways, we can see them now looking down towards Avdiivka, which is now a few miles away from the battlefield. The battlefield's now further to the east, to the right side of the screen. And we see them just continuing to look around. We're actually going to skip forward a little bit to the part where the slag heap starts getting stricken. There we go. Now we're finally seeing that artillery rounds from the Ukrainians are hitting on the slag heap and trying to knock out any Russian forces that are there. That is actually a really high mound. I mean, that thing is at least several hundred feet high. And we see the smoke now rising off the top of the slag heap, and we're now going to skip forward a little bit more where we see the remnants of the cloud that was caused by the explosion. And with that, that's largely the end of the clip, but still showing us a pretty big explosion that occurred on top of the slag heap today as the 110th Brigade shelled it. Moving on from that and closer to the active front line, we also got to see that the 110th also blew up a pile of Russian mines in the area as well. Check this out. We can see them zooming in on the destroyed houses within this village and trying to find the mine cache. We can now see here they're continuing to look down the streets up and down. The 110th Brigade loves to give a lot of exposition to their clips. We're going to skip forward a little bit so that way y'all aren't just watching us get like a view of the terrain. And oh, look, they hit it right there. There was the open air mine cache, and it just got hit. And that hits harder than a strike right there, Matthew.
It hits hard. I'm telling you. I'm telling you what.
Oh, it hits good. Sorry, I had to throw out that scream, y'all. I'm just that energized. I'm trying to keep it down tonight, but honestly, absolutely hyped. Can't wait. Can't wait for fun things to begin, because this explosion is going to be massive in a second. And we see the fire still burning on top of the mine. Oh, and it's getting a little bit faster, and it's starting to spread a little bit. At some point, the inside of the mine will end up getting hot enough that one of them will explode, and it'll cause a chain reaction that'll end up detonating all of them in one fell swoop. And we see the fire still starting to pick up down there. It's about a crescendo in a little bit. James Jaskovsky said, "The suspense!" And it really is, because this fire is spreading a lot. It's covering half of the mine pit now. None of the mines have gone off yet. It's like a barbecue down there. Put an LSA in the chat if you like a good barbecue. And it's still burning. When does the explosion happen? For real, for real. When does it happen? Where does it happen? So it looks like we maybe had a little bit of a larger explosion a little bit later on. The entire mine pit, though, catches on fire. You can see that right down there. But we don't really get a massive... well, actually, we kind of got an explosion right here. Right, I think about here. But a lot of these mines actually didn't end up exploding. They just kind of burned out, which is really weird to see, because usually they explode massively, like that one did. But usually all of them do that at one time. But that's largely the end of this clip, and once again showing us another mine cache getting blown to smithereens. Moving on from that and down into the area of Oleksandrivka, we also got to see the 81st Airborne hitting Russian forces in this area. And we're going to be muting that. And we see them dropping a grenade into that BMP-2 and cooking it. Oh my lord. Dang, what an explosion. And we can see right there another explosion occurring on another Russian vehicle.
They just can't catch a break out here, I'm telling you what. Exploding left and right.
Left and right, front and center. And Matthew, my goodness, I saw something in the chat about strike, call us Babe Ruth, because we're going to be hitting a home run. But moving on from that, and down at the Novomikhailivka, we're about to see some Russians getting hit again. Bada swing, bada swing. And here's the clip. Ooh, wow, that was fast. That was a really fast flying drone right there. Oh, and the Russian, oh, блядь, ishmoki, блядь. I was a little cooked, блядь. but now I'm well done. Oh, well, you see the FPV pilots piloting in another one that hit dead on the nail. Look at that. And just over and over and over. Now we see the next clip, showing further destruction from the 79th Brigade. They don't let anyone escape their grasp. A lot like the Lee Spring Army doesn't let people escape its grasp either. What a hit. And here comes the other one. Oh, wow, what a hit. And a bada bing, a bada boom. And there goes another one. And here comes another one. And a bada boom, and a bada bing. And another one. Call the Russians the hammer and sickle because they are getting hammered by nails. And we can see here them continuing to get hit. The 79th gives no breaks to the Russians. Pull Odo. And we just see them continuing to get hit. Over and over again. Look at this guy. He tries to hide. No point in that. Hits him right on. Another one. Right down in that trench. The Russian was napping. Now he takes a permanent nap. And this BMP gets obliterated. And oh my goodness, there went a tarp. And we can see a barn on the run right here. It ended up being bailed, and it looks like they started hunting down the crew members. And we see them continuing to hit multiple different Russian vehicles in the area. And a couple of Russians taking naps, and that's the end of the clip right there, but very nice to see. And moving on from that and down to the area of Volodar, we also got to see some combat footage from the 72nd Brigade near to the area. Check it out. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see them moving up behind the BMP-1. Actually, it's a BMP-2, correction. We can now see them loading a rifle-fire grenade. You see them continuing to fight in the region. An RPG is fired. The boosh! Right there. We can now see them running into cover again. Firing the AK. Firing the RPG. We can see the BMP-2 rolling back now. And that's the end of the clip. But very nice to see. Absolutely love to see something like this, and wonderful to know that they were able to do their thing down there. And moving on from that and down into the area of Novokarlivka, we also got to see the Russians getting hit down here as well. Oh, excuse me. That sounds copyright. And we see the drone just looking at things, observing things, really taking it all in as it flies right into the Russian warehouse and blows up. Ooh!
No chance.
No chance. And someone else is about to have no chances either. But with that, that's the end of that clip, and really nice to see. And moving on from that and on into the next clip near Andreevsky, we also got to see that a HIMARS got hit by a Thor, well, actually a Thor system got hit by a HIMARS. There's the Thor system out there in the middle of the field, and it's about to get slammed by a HIMARS missile. And there it is, just sitting there. It doesn't know that it's about to be obliterated and sent to Kingdom Come, but it's about to. Any second now. It's about to get hit. And that moment is coming right about now. And hit dead on the nail by a HIMARS, another Thor system knocked out. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. And we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on up out of the southern front and on into the area of western Ukraine, where we also got to see a S-21 in training. Check this out. Isn't it beautiful? What a cool little system. A Soviet SPG, but still used a decent amount by the Ukrainian armed forces. Moving on from that, though, we do have to talk about the sabotages of Western industry inside, the Western industry, possibly by the Russians. Today, the major German aerospace defense company, Diehl, had a large fire at its headquarters, which we covered a little bit earlier. And why is that happening so often? A lot of people are saying that it may be sabotage from Russia. Some people are saying that the fires are just being publicized. Some other people are saying that increased output is leading to more accidents. And some people are saying that it's just simply a one-off and there's really no concern to be had here. But Matthew, what are people saying and what are you thinking about this?
Okay, so on this poll, it says today a major German aerospace defense company had a large fire at their HQ at Diehl, and why is it happening so often? 62% said Russian sabotages Western manufacturing, 15% said increased output equals more accidents, and 12% said the fires are simply just now being publicized, and 11% said it's just a one-off and no concern. And for me, like I've said before, I think there is some type of attempts in the background for Russia to sabotage Western manufacturing. I think that's logical that they would try to do that because Russia is trying to basically cripple the Western base of military defense. But also, I would say that the increased output is going to raise the likelihood of accidents like this happening, and that could be a big part of it as well. So it's kind of a combination, but more toward the sabotage side. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would actually have to be leading more towards the Russians are sabotaging these ammunition plants, because fires like these in Western ammunition plants are quite rare due to the high standards of safety that are enforced, particularly in America. That would be through OSHA. And for that reason, I'm highly doubting that a lot of these fires are normal or naturally occurring due to operations in the workspace. I believe that these are most likely some sort of sabotage attempts or really it is just sabotage to try and knock out Western arms manufacturing in the middle of the Ukraine war. That would be my honest opinion on that. But with that, it is time for us to move on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 800 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech from President Zelensky. I knew it was going to be short because he was outside. For some reason, the speeches that are outside are always short, Matthew. I don't know if you've realized that, but I started to realize that every time I see him standing out somewhere, I'm like, it's going to be short. But
It's a short one. Speech.
But without further ado, here is the peach.
Українці, українки, сьогодні у Хмельницькому день присвячений ситуації в області, безпекові питання, захист регіону. Все, що стосується внеску Хмельницької області в оборону всієї нашої держави. Були детальні доповіді щодо ППО і РЕБ в області на ключових об'єктах. Ми обговорили безпеку Хмельницької атомної станції, загалом потенціал енергетики в регіоні та відновлення тих об'єктів, які були пошкоджені російськими ударами. Призначив сьогодні очільника обласної адміністрації Сергія Тюріна. Презентували в області нашу економічну платформу «Зроблено в Україні», мав нагоду поспілкуватись і подякувати підприємцям регіону. Усім, хто зберігає робочі місця та забезпечує економічну основу для нашої держави. Окремо сьогодні зустрівся із нашими прикордонниками, з хлопцями нашими і дівчатами, з курсантами Академії Державної прикордонної служби України, які навчаються бути сильними, щоб держава наша ставала сильніше. Навчаються тут, у Хмельницькому, а також були ліцеїсти. Я хочу подякувати всім викладачам Академії за фаховість, командному складу прикордонної служби, командувачу генерал-лейтенанту Сергію Дейнеці, міністру внутрішніх справ Ігорю Клименку за підтримку і кожному нашому воїну, прикордоннику за те, що всі українці можуть бути впевнені у вашій вірності Україні. І почав цей день відвідуванням військового госпіталю та вдячністю нашим лікарям, медичним сестрам, братам, кожному і кожній, хто допомагає рятувати наших воїнів після поранень та забезпечує реабілітацію. Найважливіше – все робити на своєму рівні так, щоб вся наша Україна могла досягти потрібних результатів. Кожен, хто воює заради нашої держави, кожен, хто працює, щоб ми вистояли, усі, хто допомагають. Дякую вам і пишаюся вами. Пишаюся Україною. Дякую тобі, Хмельницький, за цей день. Слава Україні!
And
Бажаю
Героям
здоров'я.
слава. Whoa, what's going on?
I don't know. It started over again. I have no idea. Mind of its own. But with that, Heroam Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that's going to be moving us on into part 2 of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. It's an incredibly fun time. We get to talk to everyone who threw in a super chat, and thank y'all for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And we also get to go and talk to all of y'all about anything y'all want to talk about. And that is an incredibly fun time that we get to do as well. We also get to talk about all just a matter of fun things, incredibly fun things. But I do want to make this quite clear. From this point forward, there is no news. So if you're here expecting news, you are too late in the stream. Rewind it to the beginning and start there, because that's where the news is. That's where the news exists. But beyond that, there is no news beyond this point. It's a question segment, so we get to talk to all of y'all about anything y'all want to hear. And so with that, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so jumping into our final segment of the night, we have our first question here, which goes to Agent B7, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Agent B7, for that very generous support. And he said, I was wondering if my Putin-supporting parents had any reflection. And he said, well, my mom messaged me today for the first time in months with a link to a Z channel boasting about the Western Armor exhibit in Moscow. And they said their parents are allegedly proud Nazis, they said. Goodness.
Oh, goodness. And I got to thank you so much for the massive support, Agent B7. But one thing I got to say is I'm personally, I usually, like, when people are like that, I don't really put that much stock into it if they're pro-Russians. I just generally believe those people are misinformed. But I don't really, I personally don't go as far as really putting them down or going after them or anything, because, you know, I mean, this will sound weird. I don't know how people will take this, but I always view the United States as a free country. So everyone's opinion is their opinion. Their opinion doesn't bother me. My opinion doesn't bother them. And so if I hear someone say they are pro-Russian, I'll be quite honest with you all. My reaction to hearing that in person is, I mean, you know, because I'm like, well, you know, small group of people, you know, there's not really that many pro-Russians out there. And not only that, it's not changing my mindset on things. I'm still a pro-Ukrainian, and, you know, hell, they might be incredibly nice people still, you know, and so that's kind of the way I look at it. I never really let it bother me that much when people are pro-Russian or anything like that, because it doesn't really change the mindset of what I'm thinking or what I do. So I just don't let it bother me. And on top of that, it's a free country. I never want to act like anyone. Well, I will say this: it's not an American thing, in my opinion, to support Russia, and it's against America's interests. But it is a free country, so if they want to think something like that, I'm not gonna, you know, go out of my way to act like they're evil, heinous people. I mean, you know, because it's what they can think. It's a free country; they can think what they want. But it is wrong, in my opinion. I don't think that the Russians are on the right side of history. The Russians are certainly on the wrong side, because I'm an American, so we look at things in America, in the Western world, as being on the right side of history when they benefit the West. And so for them to be on the opposite side and doing things against Western interests, I'm personally not a big fan. And so with that, I hope that addresses that well, in my opinion. But I hate to hear that, because at the same time, those are your parents, so that's probably why it's more kind of bizarre to hear that, because they're your parents. You're like, why the hell would you say something like that? That's just asinine, honestly. And I don't know why people think that, you know, because I've talked to people who are pro-Russians, and it really just comes down to, I hate America. So I like them because they hate America like I hate America. That's kind of what it comes down to in the end, because I've never seen anyone actually explain how the Russians winning the war will be in our interests here in this country. It's honestly, like, the mindset I've heard from pro-Russians is usually, I hate America and I kind of want the ship to go down, so anyone who's taking the ship down, I'm all on board with them. That's honestly the mindset I've heard. And that's why I never really get that bothered by those mindsets, because those mindsets are simply just easily defeated by logic. It's like, well, no matter how much you want the ship to sink, you're still on board the ship. You're going to drown if it goes down. I don't know if you know that. So obviously, people are not going to really be on board with that kind of thinking. In the end, that's why Congress ended up passing Ukraine support again, just like we said we would, like we said they would, because no matter what people say with that kind of goofiness, if it really started to affect them, that stuff goes out the window. Just like people in America before World War II, some of them were members of the American Nazi Party, and a lot of them ended up dropping that, or a lot of them ended up getting arrested once the war began because they were either enemies of the United States at that point publicly, or they figured out it was a bunch of bogus, and they were now on board the ship that would be going down if the Nazis won. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, but still, I hate to hear that, Agent B7, and I thank you for the massive support, and I hope I was able to address my mindset on that fairly well. And I always try and be reasonable with those things because, some people, and this comes with everything, this comes with every movement out there, whether it be pro-Western, whether it be all kinds of things. Everyone always gets to a point where they get reviled, or regaled. I don't know which one's the proper word, honestly, right now at the moment. Whenever they hear an opinion that is against theirs, and I've really over just a couple of years of doing this, I've come down to the point it doesn't matter what people say. I mean, people say heinous things about us running this channel every day, and it doesn't really change anything. And so when people say heinous things about Ukraine or heinous things about Western interests or the United States, I end up not really caring, because I'm just like, well, it's a free country. They can think what they want. No matter how offended I get by their statements, they're still going to think that way at the end of the day. It's just that hopefully through logic and reasoning, the right side, which of course will always be the side that you believe in, so it's the Western side for me, will end up prevailing at the end of the day, just simply because it's the more logical end to everything that's going on out there. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, but I still understand. Like, while I'm saying that I wouldn't let it bother me that much, and I'm trying to say these things hopefully to comfort you, so that way you don't really get bothered about it too much, because people can think that, and it doesn't really, it doesn't mean a hill of beans, but I understand why you're bothered about it, because that would bother me if someone in my family was like, oh yeah, I'm all 100% for Russia. I'd be like, do you want us all dead? Like, do you want us all killed or something? Like, are you crazy? But, it's a tough conundrum there. But still, thank you so much for the support, Agent B7, the massive support in helping this channel to keep on running. I hope I was able to share something that may help out in the end with trying to reconcile that or make sense of it, or at least dismiss it a little bit better, because that's how I view it. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that as best as I possibly can, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and helping it to be possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, and we wouldn't be able to talk about tough family dynamics and conundrums like that bother people. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Blue Flam 777 LSA. It puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Blue Flam, for that support. He says, let's get philosophical. He says, if everything happens for a reason, then why do pants exist, he says. Love Ukraine. And he puts the middle finger to Russia. LSA rocks. And, Chris's mom has got it going on. Let's just keep the enforcer away from maths. And question to the chat.
Man. Maths is not my strong point. I think many of y'all can tell that by this point. I'm not good at math. I'm terrible at math. And luckily, one day, I'll get better at it. And so, let's see. One second, man. I just saw something. Interesting. But anyways, moving on from that, I do have to say, getting philosophical, if everything happens for a reason, then why do pants exist? I don't know what that's asking. Do you know what that's asking, Matthew?
What's a joke, I think, but I'm not sure if I get it.
I don't get it either. I would have to say that is interesting. I don't know what to take from that. I don't know where to go with that. But still, beyond that, thank you so much once again, and also Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And Chris's mom, Chris's mom has got it going on to get around the block, or the city, or really the nation more so, because just like the eagle is the national bird of the United States of America, Chris's mom is the national STD transmitter of the nation as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And we will make sure to send a question to the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the question from the chat is going to go to, let's see here, I am Gift Bearer, who says, is Turkey now turning on Ukraine too, since Ukraine is an ally with Israel?
No, actually, they're still in good terms with Ukraine, because the thing that's really hard to explain about diplomacy is that people do things just to position themselves. And that's something that people don't really get. Religion and money are really just ends to power as far as diplomacy is concerned. And that's why Turkey can have a completely different position with Ukraine and the Balkans than they do in the Middle East, is because it really has nothing to do with Islam. It has nothing to do with who Ukraine supports at the end of the day. It has to do with Turkey trying to build a sphere of influence and eventually a kind of power in the area that they will be able to keep hold of for a while. That's really what it all comes down to in the end when we're talking about what Turkey is doing. And that's what a lot of people can't remove. And also that's one thing that people don't get as well throughout history, because people will always say, if you're like a Marxist, people will say wars have always been created as a class war, or something like that. Or if you're say an atheist or something, you'll say that wars are always created by religion. And that's not true. Wars are created by religion, and wars are created by money. But wars at their core are not about money, and they're not about religion. It's more so about leveraging power in an area and being able to use those as vehicles to gain more power. And someone will lose power in the end. But the person who instigates conflicts and uses that as justification, they end up, or ideology for that matter, which in the modern day sometimes replaces religion in that role, it's all about gaining power. Because no matter what, the Russians say that they're invading Ukraine because the Ukrainians were building biolabs, and they're fascists. And fascism is a big thing ideologically that is just, it's just the thing that you have to destroy. If you call anything fascist, it is literally the absolute pit of despair. It's the worst of the worst. And Russia uses that ideology to invade Ukraine. Although Ukraine is not a fascist country and really doesn't have any fascist elements in it that are incredibly larger than any other country. That's what they say. But the thing about that is that it has nothing to do with fighting fascism. The Russian war in Ukraine is all about leveraging more economic and military power for the Russians in the long term. That's what this is all about in the end. And that's what all wars boil down to. That's what everything boils down to in the end. The United States doesn't support Israel because we love Jews. We support Israel because Israel is a strategic imperative in the region and allows us a massive access into this area that otherwise would be inaccessible for the most part. We do not support Saudi Arabia because we love a monarchy. We support Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is a massive oil producer, and not only that, they're a strategic asset in the region as well. It has nothing to do with how much money they have or what kind of religion they have or anything along those matters. It has to do with gaining or losing power. That's what every single war comes down to at the end of the day. And so I would have to say that as far as Turkey goes, that's really what Turkey's doing. So they're not becoming an enemy of Ukraine because they're losing power that way. They're more than happy to be a friend of Ukraine. They're still building the Corvettes for Ukraine. I believe Zelensky actually went to Turkey recently and actually got to look at them or christen them. Actually, I think it was his wife that christened the Corvettes, but and now they're being fitted out. But nevertheless, that's how the world works, and that's how Turkey looks at the world. It has nothing to do with trying to support Islam and make that their entire thing. That's their kind of a sales pitch that they're giving in the Middle East to end up building economic and soft power. The sales pitch they're giving in the Balkans is that they bring economic opportunity to them. And then to Ukraine, the sales pitch that they're giving to Ukraine is not only are they going to be bringing economic opportunity to Ukraine, but they're also going to be helping them to win the war in a way in the end. And so going off of all of that, you can kind of get an idea. It has nothing to do with a two-dimensional metric like trying to gain money or trying to get really ingrained in religion. It's just more so about building power and then building a sphere of influence in the region because of that. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least how I'm looking at it on Turkey's end at the moment. And I thank you, Blue Flam 777, for supporting that for that live chat and really throwing in an interesting one, because that was a great one, and I'm more than happy that we were able to get into a deep dive about how the world works. And that's also another thing that I really kind of want to get into for a moment, is that not just Turkey, you can take this as a universal application around the world. And this is why I also don't get into domestic politics, because domestic politics works a lot off of passion, in passion for things like, really just ideological things. And I want to make that quite clear. I see apparently religion is becoming a big topic in the chat because I tried to bring it up in a neutral way. But no politics, no religion in the chat. That's a channel rule. We don't want to know what religious or political affiliation you have, and we don't need to know it. But moving on from that, every single thing in the world, it really has to do with gaining power for a country and another country losing a power, or losing power. That's what everything comes down to in the entire world. The vehicles for doing that are usually emotional appeals, because the common people who aren't involved in governance or administration, which is every single one of us, we don't really look at how power is gained or lost on a national level or an international level. We just look at things that are ideological, things that are emotional, because we don't operate on a national level. We're not nations, we're people. And so for a nation to justify doing an action to gain power or to exchange power, they have to justify that to everyone inside the country. So then they go through a metric that the folks in the country will understand. Like with the United States, our ideology of spreading democracy, like, when we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, which had nothing to do with spreading democracy. It had a lot to do with us maintaining power in the region and also trying to quash where we believed our enemies were around the world. That was really what it was about. But to sell that to everyone, we had to say that we were invading these oppressive regimes and we were going to liberate these people and bring them into democracy, which was honestly a tertiary goal at best. That's not what we did it for. We did it because we're ensuring that we continue to keep our power at a steady level. And so I hope that explains that the best I can, because the big takeaway that you should be looking at the world at, you shouldn't be looking at the world through an emotional lens or an ideological lens where we talk about religion or money or fascism or democracy or communism, because at the end of it all of these are just really motivators, or more so ends, to an increase or a decrease of power for a country. That's really all it is once you get down to it. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, kind of as like a whole philosophical aside. But with that, thank you so much once again for support, Blue Flam, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Dr. C. Drake, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Dr. C, for that support. That's very generous of you. And he says, CV Parabellum. And he also puts in some German, of all things. And this German says, if you strive for peace or peaceful times, prepare for war. That's what it says. And I read that off the dome. I'm telling you what. I still know German a little bit. But thank you very, very much, Dr. C, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you. Dang, man, you good? You good?
I'm a long man.
Yeah, 9mm, it blows out the lung. But beyond that, I gotta say, I love to see that we have some Germans, I'm assuming, here. Either you're an Austrian or a German, one or the other. And I gotta thank you for the incredible support, Dr. C. Drake, and helping this channel to keep on running. And not only that, throwing in some German, because Matthew knows a little bit of German. I don't really know much, but I do know Krieg, which is war. And so thank you so much for the support, the massive support. And also, I also had to, let's see, Civis Parabellum. Bellum means war. Let's see, Parabellum. Antebellum is before the war. I think Parabellum is after the war. Let me just put that in. Let's see. Civis Parabellum. And this means, let's see, if you want, Civis Parabellum means if you want peace, prepare for war as well. So you put that in Latin and in German, which is really cool. But still, I gotta thank you so much once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep it running. And it's entirely true. If you do want peace, you have to be ready for war, because peace is the pinnacle of war, funnily enough. You have to get through a lot of war and a lot of bloodshed to make peace. or to have a peace. And so it's really the absolute pinnacle of what a war is supposed to achieve, which is peace. And then you pretty much have to be at a constant state to be ready to conduct war, to be able to ensure that that peace remains for as long as it possibly can. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Dr. C. Drake, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and make this thing a reality. And Matthew, I see that the bots are starting to attack us with a brand new phrase. We're apparently now Zionists as well. Incredible.
Oh,
We are
Zionists?
We are now fascist, communist, let's see, Zionists. So we're all we're like a complete trifecta, the holy trinity of the most extremes that you can get in every direction. We're all three of them now, according to the bots. We're also funded by George Soros. We are lizard people. We have connections with the CIA, and we also have connections with the FSB, and are actually secretly pro-Russian shills. And not only that, we are also paid by the Ukrainian government as well. Our tendrils are in every single corner of the globe, according to the bots. And I gotta say,
no, not George Soros. No, not him.
I don't know why, but apparently George Soros is like the boogeyman for some reason. I don't know why that random guy is the boogeyman. Because honestly,
Some
I
of
feel
it's valid.
What?
But some of it's not. Some of it's valid, but some of it's not.
Yo, that's valid. That's so valid.
Facts. I said facts.
Man, and next thing you know, someone will come in here in a minute, and I'll bet y'all money. Y'all will see it, at least for like a second. Someone will call us a communist or a fascist, one or the other, and those are the two complete opposites as well. But we'll get called it eventually. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Steve Edgington, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, Steve, for that very generous support. And Steve says, thank you for all you do, gentlemen. And thank you, Steve, very much for supporting the channel and the kind words as well. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you for enjoying what we do so much. I gotta say, it's crazy to think about this, and I gotta thank you so much once again for support. Speaking about something that we could tell did not go the way it was meant to go the other day, we went through and we looked at a place where someone had asked the question, why do y'all like the Enforcer? And it was kind of worded in a way that we knew it was not being asked like, I'm just curious, why do y'all like the Enforcer? Like, why is he cool? It was more so asked like, why in the world do y'all like that jackass? That was kind of the way the question was asked. And actually, a lot of people came in and said incredibly nice things. And one of the things that I saw a lot of people say is that we take this quite seriously and we run this show like clockwork. So a lot of people can always know and expect that we will be on air and we will be telling the news for the day. Unlike everyone else who kind of treats this like a hobby where they just kind of get on and off and they have regular schedules. We do this every single day, and we're really the only people who do. There's very few other people who do that. And I gotta say that I thank you so much for appreciating our efforts and work, because it must be something that we take for granted. Because I take it for granted, honestly, that I get on here and do this 6 days a week. But apparently everyone else out there considers that to be a blessing that we are on 6 days a week. And I gotta say that is incredible to know that all of y'all enjoy how regularly we run this channel, and not only that, how we get to the news and how we back everything up with picture and video evidence, because we try our best to make sure that everything we say is backed up with fact. And then something else I saw, because this was really where this question was aimed. It was more so aimed at trying to draw out criticism while saying something positive, because I also saw an okay amount of comments that also went that direction. And one thing that I saw that a lot of people would say is that our predictions are always off, which I find really weird, considering that we predicted that Ukraine war support would come back around even before the election came in the United States, which everyone else was saying the complete opposite, and then we ended up being right, while no one else ended up being right on that, so that prediction was dead on the nail. Then our prediction that Iran was going to attack Israel was dead on the nail. Our prediction that Israel was then going to return an attack on Iran was dead on the nail. Our prediction that the conflict was going to continue to escalate was dead on the nail, because now we know that Israel is going to invade Lebanon, which was right on. We were able to predict a lot of how the war in Ukraine has been going on as well. Pretty much dead to a T. And I'm not saying all this so that way we can sound like we're arrogant and we're the best. But when people say that, it's like, but we got all those things right when other people were getting them wrong. Like, a lot of people said that Iran is not going to attack Israel. Loads of people said that. And then they ended up attacking Israel. And we were just waiting for the moment. And then a lot of people also said Israel is not going to return an attack against Iran, which then they were all wrong. And then they ended up conducting an attack on Iran. And it's not like crystal balling is something to be proud of, getting it right or wrong. But when I saw an okay amount of people saying this, and then I started seeing some names that Matthew and me know due to the Lee Spring Army secret police, were names that had been associated with other very questionable people. And then we were like, that is interesting, that really the only negative words that are said about this channel are really all from just one group. Beyond that, it seems like a lot of people actually enjoy what we do. And I got to thank you so much for being one of those folks and enjoying it enough to support it and help it to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Neil Vizanant, the longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Neil, for that support. And he put in a $20 donation. And he said, 4 or 5 armored vehicles in Red Square for 4,000 to 5,000 troops, question mark. Yes, please. And I can't believe what we're on day 800, actually. He says, keep on keeping on, LSA.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because I would have to say that is something that is funny to think about. It's been 800 days and they finally put these tanks out, and they have lost hundreds of thousands of wounded and killed just to get a couple of tanks from the West. What do you think about that? That's really crazy to imagine that they're proud of that, because when you look at the losses that it took to get to that point, it was not worth it just to have a small little display in Red Square. So thank you so much for the support. And I gotta say, it is crazy to think that it's 800 days now, and we're still trucking on this channel, and we're going to keep on trucking probably until almost day 1000, honestly, on this channel, and hopefully by then the war will be over. And so, with that, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for greatly enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one here, we have one from Strong River Flats, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Strong River Flats, for that support. He says, are they really producing that much new armor, or are they doing some creative photography?
Are they, can you reread that one again really quickly?
They said, are they really producing that much new armor, or are they doing some creative photography?
They are doing some creative photography, because we've seen that a lot through the war, but we're never seeing any more modern main battle tanks being introduced in high enough numbers to show that they're producing that many tanks. So really imaginative and creative photography, but we see that on the front lines, that's never being backed up as being what the actual situation is. The tanks are getting increasingly older as the war is going on, and that's becoming a common fact on the battlefield that you can confirm in picture and video evidence as the wars continue to go by. It's gone from old tanks that were heavily modernized to now it's just old tanks and even older tanks on the front lines. So going off of that, I would have to say that they're really exaggerating the war industry inside of Russia, because it's not at all reflective of the frontline situation, and therefore the war industry is not as good as the Russians are saying it is. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Cindy Mitchell, who also puts in a very generous $20 donation. Hey! And thank you very much, Cindy. She said, today is Tucker's birthday, and happy birthday to Tucker. I'll tell you what, hope he's had a good one. He said he does miss you guys, and between hockey and school and hockey, Tim Bitt, we are proud of you boys. And thank you very much to you, Tucker, and also Cindy as well. And we love having y'all watching. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a happy birthday to Tucker, and welcome back to both of y'all, Tucker and Cindy Mitchell, because I haven't seen y'all's names in the live chat or in a super chat for quite some time. And I gotta say, welcome back, and also happy birthday to Tucker. I hope you've been having an incredible birthday. I hope it was fun, and hopefully this stream is a highlight of the day. Hopefully it's not boring or anything. I would hate for that, because I would hate to know that I ruined some part of your birthday. But still, happy birthday to Tucker, one of the youngest members of the Lee Spring Army. I hope you've been doing well, and also really cool to hear that Tucker plays hockey. That is really, really cool, because looking back now, I'm not really sure if I would have wanted to play a sport in high school. I actually didn't. And now looking back, I'm like, maybe that would have been a little bit fun in a way to stay fit. I don't think I would have done football though, because I didn't want my brain to get rattled, because maybe I wouldn't be able to analyze war well enough now. Maybe I'd do something like baseball or something along those lines. But still, happy birthday to Tucker. The hockey is an incredibly cool sport, and we actually have some friends who have wanted to have us watch a hockey game for a long time. And so that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And Tucker, make sure to pay attention in school. Do not be like me. Do not look like an idiot who cannot do math. Make sure to learn math, because someone in the Elite Spring Army has got to know math, and it's going to be you, Tucker. It's got to be you, because I messed up, but you still have a chance, Tucker. And so that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you to both of y'all for being here with us tonight, especially on Tucker's birthday. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Steve D, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Steve, for your support as well. He says, isn't a concentration ton of troops in Red Square a fair tax get?
What?
I'm not really sure. I think he meant to say, I think he meant to say, is that a fair target? But he said a fair tax get.
Yeah, it was Target. Now that you said that, I'm like, yeah, I see where that was a typo. It's a Target. To answer that question, Steve, that is not a fair target, because they are disabled vehicles. They're not actual usable tanks. And not only that, there's a large amount of civilians around them, so that would not be a viable target. That would be a very big stretch to make those targets, considering that they are destroyed and disabled vehicles. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because I'd largely have to dissuade attacking those vehicles. They're already disabled, they're on display, they're not usable vehicles of war, and so there's no point in targeting them and destroying them. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Steve, and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope I was able to address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that next one is going to go to Coin Collector, who puts in a 20 and says, great news program out there. Great news program.
And thank you so much for support. Matthew just kind of ended there. He's like, great news program. Great news program. And I was like, oh, well, there's nothing more. But still, thank you so much for the support. And thank you for enjoying the news program. We try our best to put on the best show we can, and I'm glad to know that you enjoy it, because we put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to make sure that we're here pretty much every single day of the week, 6 days a week, running a live show and making sure to cover the news. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help to make it possible. And with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is going to go to Andy L, and he put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Andy, for your support also. Andy says, does Ukraine have the ability to take down the Kursk Bridge? And if yes, why haven't they done it?
Yes, they do have the ability to take down the Kerch Bridge at this point, because from what we understand, they now have the long-range ATACMS missiles that would be needed to successfully conduct a strike. The reason why we believe that they have not conducted a strike at the moment is because it may not be an opportune time. They may be waiting for a busier time traffic-wise in the year for them to repair the, to knock out the bridge, for then to be completely out, so that way they're affecting the highest amount of traffic as possible. That may be why they're waiting. There may be some other reasons why they're waiting. It may be that they're trying to see if they can knock out enough Russian air defense around the Kerch Bridge that there won't be a lot of chances for those missiles to get intercepted before they make it to the Kerch Bridge air defense ring. That may be another reason why they're trying to wait this out and see about striking a little bit later. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for support, Andy L., a true Lee Spring Army legend from the great state of Texas, and not only that, an amazing viewer as well. I got to thank you so much once again for support and asking a really good question, and I hope I was able to at least give a couple of ideas or reasons as to why they may be holding off, because we never know the exact reason on this channel, but we can always hypothesize some logical conclusions, perhaps, on why the bridge is not being stricken at the moment. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this next one goes to Chonky Cat, who puts in a 15 and says, I love all you people from USA, and I'm so grateful for the U.S. military protecting and supporting us here in Europe, and the U.S. military kicks ass, and are heroes, and thank you for being our ally from Sweden.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for being one of our Swedes in the Lee Spring Army. And I got to thank you so much for appreciating the United States, because we are the forefront nation in the Western sphere that has to really lead its defense and also lead it economically. And I'm happy to know that people do appreciate that, because it's a tough role to be in. Some people like it. Some people like the United States. Some people hate the United States simply because we're in this position. But nevertheless, it's great to know that folks like you, all the way from Sweden, appreciate what the United States does in this position and what we have to end up kind of doing as well. It's not an easy role for the United States, and I'm glad to know that you're glad to have us as friends, because we're always glad to have folks like y'all in Sweden as friends as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Chonky Cat, and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and remind us all that the Western world has an endless amount of friends, an amazing amount of people who are all united behind a common goal of ensuring our mutual, I guess you could say, growth and also success. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that as best as possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is a $10 super chat from Certify, who says, "Hurrah, hurrah, LSA, LSA. And the new computer driving me crazy, and I want good news tonight."
Hey, and I hope I was able to get you the good news tonight, Certify, and I thank you so much for the support, and also, I thank you for putting in that little huzzah, huzzah. It's great to hear. We love to hear it. I actually haven't heard that in a while. That's actually like an 18th century kind of like sorry, hurrah. I thought I heard huzzah. But hurrah and huzzah are kind of like older, I guess you could say, cheers from like the 18th century, but really cool to hear it. And also, I hate to hear the new computer is driving you crazy. Matthew will let y'all know, he can back me up on this, that running a stream, I have like a very specific setup that I have, like where the monitors are set up, where the microphone's set up, where the mouse and keyboard are, the kind of chair I'm sitting in, and if any of those are slightly changed at all, I go mental. And so, like, I completely understand. That would be driving me crazy too, but I hope we were able to get you some good news tonight, Certify. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for making this channel possible and being an old guard as well.
Yes, indeed. And moving on to our next super chat here, we have another one from Blue Flam 777 LSA, the longtime channel legend, and he puts in another 50. Generous support. He says, "I saw a sign that said, 'Watch for children.' I thought, that sounds like a fair trade. Think. The Brothers Enforcer Rocks, LSA. Question to the chat."
Do you get it, Matthew?
I don't get it.
Like a watch on your wrist for children, like you trade.
Whoa, Jack!
Whoa, Jack! Whoa! Whoa!
Epstein, is that you?
Sounds like it sounds like someone's about to die in their prison cell. but beyond that, thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame. That is an interesting one. I see the play on the words there, and I know that you're not trying to inference that. It's just a play on the words of the sign "Watch for Children," because that's a common sign in American neighborhoods. By the way, y'all, he's not kidding. There was an actual sign that says "Watch for Children." But interesting, very interesting indeed. And I got to thank you for the support and throwing an interesting pun and also helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to send a question to the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the question to the chat, honored by Blue Flam 777, it goes to Uncovered Cube, who says, "Should Ukraine make a statement on May the 9th and hit something in Russia very hard?"
They could try and hit something in Russia very hard on May 9th. They'll probably hit refineries, but that will not stop them from putting up a good facade in Moscow and pretending like things are fine. So yes, they could strike on May 9th, but beyond that, really just being a thing for us all to cheer on in the West, they will make sure that no one hears about that inside of Russia if May 9th, well, if it is May 9th. Also, another thing that's interesting is that when we look at this, it says Olymp Tools on this, which got a 1-star rating. Can we get the reviews? "Hello, someone. Remove this nonsense from Red Square. I mean, with Google Maps." Bottom line advertising, of course. And then we've got Evgeny Prigozhin. Holy, oh my God, it's a Prigozhin, Matthew. They put a 1-star on this.
Oh my God, man, he came back just to bash him a little bit.
Stigo! Olymp Tools on the map, блядь. But anyways, oh man, that is crazy. That is Evgeny. That is literally the name Yevgeny Prigozhin right there in Russian. Like, I did not catch it when I was reading it, but that is Yevgeny Prigozhin. That is whack. And this person right here is Nikolai Pavlovets. So interesting. Nikolai Pavlovets and Yevgeny Prigozhin. Very interesting to see them both here. But with that, I can't believe he put a rating on Red Square. I guess you could say that it was a crash and burn for him. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least as far as the strikes on May 9th, and as far as that would be concerned for Russia. And thank you once again for support in helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is going to go to Blind Ambition, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much as well for that support. They said, oh, hello there, Governor.
Oh, hello there. Would you like the plum, Governor? Oh, hello. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And I love to know that you're a fan of Alan the Marmot. Alan! Because it helps this channel to be possible, and not only that, we love that people love the Marmot. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, who puts in a 10 and says, on one of your first ever streams, you said, oh, wow, look, the Russians are running. Look at them go. And it gave us hope. And now 800 days later, we have the Air Force running.
Yeah, wow, you actually watch, like, really old streams, because back in the day, I didn't have a lot to add to clips. I'll be entirely honest, the reason why I didn't have a lot to add to clips is because I was scared as hell of the audience that I had, because it was so big. I was kind of like scared to say a lot and look like an idiot. But then I realized that no matter what you say, people are going to try and paint you out to be an idiot anyways, so why not just be yourself and kid around and everything in the meantime? And so that's something we learned. Like right now, there's people out there trying to make us look like idiots. And little do they know, Matthew, and I think you know what I'm talking about, they're probably going to end up paying dearly for that, at least in this particular instance. But nevertheless, legally, very much so. Legally, they will be shirtless. Legally, they'll be under a bridge. Legally, things will not be going well for them. But beyond that, moving on from that whole side note, we have to make sure to get back to this. And it is quite interesting to think that it has moved that far in such a time. But back then, I was very scared to say things like I was saying. And nowadays, I'm not. And it's made things a lot more smooth, a lot more interesting. And I also have to say that as far as things go with the Russians and the Air Force running at the beginning of the war would have been unheard of. I mean, that's how much it actually has changed over 2 years, is that back at the beginning of the war, the Ukrainians had really no way to strike deep behind Russian lines, at least until June and July, and even then it wasn't that far behind the lines. It was maybe 8 to 10 miles behind the line at best, but nowadays they are striking so far back, they can get way back there. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, let me get rid of one person there. There we go. So moving on to our next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Uncovered Cube. And he says, have you literally looked down a rabbit hole, and why is that a phrase?
I have never literally looked down a rabbit hole. At least in my opinion. I would say the reason why that phrase came up is because there is a YouTube channel called Down the Rabbit Hole, which makes documentary videos about people on the internet. And I mean, when I say documentary videos, they'll make like 20 parts, and each one's an hour and a half long. And so to me, the Down the Rabbit Hole thing comes back to that. That's where I get inspiration for my version of the phrase, is because that guy literally does go down rabbit holes. I mean, incredibly deep rabbit holes on just random people on the internet. And so when I started doing them on this channel, I was like, man, these are almost like down the rabbit hole episodes. And so then that's when I started saying the phrase. I would say, man, we're going down a rabbit hole here, because it would be a lot like what that channel did, but very, very small compared to that, because his videos are an hour and 30 minutes long, and he'll have like 10 of them in a series on the same person. But then my rabbit holes are like 10 minutes long. But as far as the stream goes, they're incredibly long. And so that's where the phrase down the rabbit hole comes from. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I see a lot of people saying it's from Alice in Wonderland. Not for me. I did not get it from Alice in Wonderland. I get it from the YouTube channel that does the Down the Rabbit Hole videos. But with that, I hope that does address that. Well, some people are going to tell me, Matthew, like where I got inspiration for the quote. No, I know now that Alice in Wonderland is where the down the rabbit hole thing comes from, because she goes down the rabbit hole and all that. But for me, the phrase actually came from the YouTube channel. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, thank you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Love is Everything, who puts in a 5 and says, love to all, and please take a question from the live chat, and thank you all for doing what you're doing.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. Love to you for enjoying what we do. We put in as much effort as we can, like I always say, and we're always proud and very happy to hear that people enjoy what we do and want to help us to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support.
All right, and our next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5. And he orders the regular. He says, take a live chat question, and we shall, CK Bold. Thank you very much for your support once again. And the live chat question is going to go to Dale Alaticus, who says, what kind of range does the Orc aircraft have?
Orc aircraft, depending on the kind of aircraft, massively vary in range. Like the Su-24 Fencer, let me go pull that up, has a range of about 3,000 kilometers or 1,900 miles. Then planes like the Su-34, which I'll pull up here really quickly, have a range of 2,485 miles. I'm doubting that one, because what it's saying with a full weapons load, and this is really just a modified Su-27, and I'm highly doubting that it will be able to travel 2,485 miles. But nevertheless, it kind of depends from aircraft to aircraft. But they're pretty far. I mean, like, according to at least the publicly stated numbers, which I'm kind of doubting a little bit, because let me type this in. F-15 range. Apparently what they're saying is that on a single tank, a F-15 Eagle could cross the Atlantic Ocean. Let me go check this on an F-16. F-16 range. I'm finding these numbers to be a little outlandish, because an F-16 can only carry about 30-something minutes of fuel. I believe it's, I think it can carry about an hour of fuel at, say, with all the external fuel tanks you can add on an F-16. And with 30 to 40 minutes, maybe an hour with the external fuel tanks of burn time, and you're going supersonic 700-something miles per hour, you're not going to be making it farther than about 800 miles in an F-16. So I'm kind of doubting all of these ranges that they're putting on the internet for these aircraft, because they are absolutely ludicrous. When we send aircraft from the United States over to the United Kingdom and Europe, they fly across the Atlantic Ocean, but it's actually a fairly in-depth process, because there's multiple aerial tankers that they have to meet along the way to be able to refuel and keep on flying into Europe. So I'm highly doubting that these ranges are accurate, because if they were true, that means that an F-15 could take off from Boston and pretty much land in Ireland, no problem. No trouble at all. And I'm really doubting that. Highly doubting that. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Because from what I understand, these numbers are highly inaccurate. I'll have to do a little bit more digging, but I will believe that it's anywhere in between 500 to 800 miles on most aircraft. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Carrie Ann LSA, who put in a $5 donation and said, doing great, gentlemen. I'm glad to hear it. And happy to say that Nick was feeling up to enjoying the stream tonight, too. And keep up the good work. And long live the LSA. And Carrie Ann, and also Nick, I'm glad y'all are both watching. Also, Nick, I'm glad you're feeling better as well, and recovering fast, it sounds like. That's very good to hear. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say that it is amazing to hear that you're doing better. And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Carrie Ann. And also, Nick, thank you for being here tonight. I didn't expect you to be here that quick again. But hey, it is wonderful to hear that you got through that surgery amazingly and that you're recovering astoundingly. I hope that you continue to be on the up and up on the recovery side of things. And I thank both of y'all, the first LSA couple, for being here with us tonight and continuing to enjoy this channel and enjoy the news. And I hope that it's helping the recovery pass by a little bit quicker, hopefully, not longer. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got another super chat this time from the Chunky Cat, who puts in a 5 and says, how miserable will Russians be in a few years? And their economy will probably collapse sooner or later. Is that right? And alcoholism and also the seppuku might skyrocket.
I'm not really sure about alcoholism. I believe is as high as it could get in Russia. Like they're drinking out the womb, so I don't think we can get any higher than that. But as far as let's see, how do I say that on YouTube without getting in a lot of trouble?
The seppuku?
Yeah, the seppukus. I don't think those will be increasing much because they didn't really increase a lot, I believe, in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. At least from what I can recall, and I didn't really look at those stats a lot, but from what I can recall, it didn't really climb much. But one thing I will say is that economic ruin will most likely be coming to Russia by the next 2 to 3 years. The Russians will not be able to financially carry on the war in Ukraine probably by the later end of this year or the early part of next year. But true financial ruin will most likely come about in 2 to 3 years or less than that, in my opinion. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least at the moment, because I would assume that financial ruin is not that far away for the Russians, considering that Gazprom, the largest natural gas provider and the third largest oil refiner and oil producer in Russia, is currently reporting that they are tanking and taking heavy losses. I would assume that Russian economic collapse can't be that far around the corner. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to be possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Cranky, who puts in a 5 and says, I need an LSA beanie. Bad. You got something want soon. I'm bald. And P.S. My lovely kids gave me my Cranky name years ago, and it just stuck.
And I thank you so much for support. Thank you for sharing it with us how you got your name like on YouTube. That's really cool. And also, beanies. That is actually an idea, Matthew. LSA beanies. That would be a pretty.
That could be a good one.
Yeah. So we might look into that actually, and probably see about doing that. Maybe we'll make it a part of a set. Because I think we probably want to sell the beanies with something else, maybe. So that way you actually get bang for the buck, and also it's worth shipping. But that is an interesting idea, and we will look into possibly trying to get the LSA beanies as a reality, not just for bald people, because there are people out there with hair that would love to have a beanie as well, I think. But still, thank you so much once again for support, and thank you for giving us a little bit of info on your backstory, and thank you once again for helping the channel to keep on running too, and finding it worthwhile to support it all. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And that next one is going to go to Agent B7 yet again, who puts in a 5 and says, do you guys think that analysts specializing in Russia and Russians will become useless after the war ends and Russia is defeated?
Nah, I don't think they will, because Russia will still have a nuclear arsenal, and not only that, Russia is just a point of interest in the Western world for really no reason. It's just that it's a weird, bizarre land, and so it's kind of like a freak fascination, to be quite honest. So I don't think those kinds of analysts are ever going to go away or disappear, just like North Korean analysts don't go away or disappear either. And North Korea is one of the most useless things to look at and analyze, kind of like Cuba. Completely useless to really look at a lot, but people still do it, and people are able to make jobs and be analysts at it. So I don't think they'll be out of work entirely at the end of the war. I think that there won't be as much interest in them, but they won't be out of business. That's for sure. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope I was able to address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2 and says, here's to the Saltine Cracker Fund, LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the Saltine Cracker Fund. Zelensky's speech was so short tonight, we couldn't eat. Like, it was just sit here and wait, honestly. That's what we ended up doing. So I'm starving to death right now, to be quite honest, but we're hanging in. And I gotta thank you for funding the Saltine Cracker Fund, because I'm gonna go right out off this stream, and I'm gonna go eat a load of saltine crackers. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well, Bruce Lee, and thank you for being an old guard of this channel and sticking around for so long. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 2 and says, it looks like the Russians will be getting no, and he puts in some arrows here, no up, down, up, down. That could mean multiple things, potentially.
Man, they ain't getting, like Let's see. Let me think. What would they not be getting? Man, they ain't getting no grease traps. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support, Dark Warrior 137, and helping this channel to keep on running. This is folks like you who help to make it possible. I don't really know what that means exactly, but I'm behind it. I back it up. And so that, thank you so much once again for support, Dark Warrior. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a Shadow Bandit puts in a 2 and brings up an interesting idea. He says, "Attack'em's Red Square, Victory Day."
Ooh. I don't think they actually
Fire the nukes! Fire the nukes now!
Oh, that would be a fire the nukes kind of a thing right there for sure. But also Moscow, I think, is too far. Well, actually, it's not. It's actually literally right within range. So you could hit Red Square with an attack'ems. You actually could do it. But I don't think it would be a good idea because there will be foreign guests that represent other countries. We will be blowing up a historical landmark, most likely, or heavily damaging it at minimum, which will infuriate the Russians massively. Not only that, there's going to be a lot of civilians there as well. And so if this thing blew up in the middle of Red Square, it's probably going to end up wounding and killing a lot of civilians. And no matter what, no matter how anti-Russian we get, I still believe in the Western principle of fighting a war in a civilized way, even if the other side doesn't do such a thing. And for that reason, I would largely be against dropping a attack'ems in the middle of Red Square and ending up probably killing a lot of innocent civilians in the process that would be protected under the rules of war. Not really a big fan of that, but you could technically actually do it. The missile does have the range. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here. Also, real quick, let me check something real quick. Let's see here. Let's see. I saw Fred Matthewson saying in the live chat. He said, "I don't see my super chat." Fred, I'm not seeing it in the sheet. So, Enforcer, do you see it on your end?
Let's see. See it on my end. Can you give me the name once again?
Fred Matthewson?
Fred Matthewson. My live chat is lagging so badly right now. Let me refresh it and then look for that. Fred Matthewson. Fred Matthewson. Let me see here. Come on, refresh.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it in the spreadsheet nor in the actual YouTube sheet either.
Let's see. Fred Matthewson. Let me look through really quickly. Hang on, everyone. So we got... Let's see. Fred Matthewson. Fred Matthewson. Do we have it? Do we have it? Fred Matthewson. I'm not seeing one on my end, and our spreadsheet in the YouTube control room gathers every single one of them and shows them whether they are the minimum of $1 or whether they're the maximum of $500. And I'm not seeing one from you at the moment. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like it came through if you sent one in because I'm not seeing one in our spreadsheet at the moment. I hate to say that though, but if you did try to throw in a super chat, thank you for trying to send one in because it is the thought that counts. And I got to thank you once again for enjoying the channel enough that you would want to support it. But sadly, I'm just not seeing it at the moment. It doesn't appear to have ever been registered on our end as coming in. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, big shout out to Dixie LaFleur, who put in a 2. Along with Eric Kress, who also put in a 2, and Slayer 9200, who put in a 1. And huge shout out to Dixie, Eric, and Slayer, very much for that support and helping to keep us running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support to all three of y'all and helping this channel to keep on running because each and every one of y'all make this thing possible. And I got to thank y'all greatly for enjoying the channel enough to want to support it and help us to keep this thing rolling because every single one of y'all makes this channel possible. And I got to thank y'all greatly once again. And so with that, I know what's next. We're about to be moving on into the live chats and the Morse code decoders. And tonight, we are going to address the Morse code message, and we're going to answer as many live chats as we possibly can until the top of the hour. So that way I can get off and make sure to go eat. And so with that, what do we got for the Morse code decoders, Matthew?
So tonight, the Morse code was decoded by Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, David Millsaps, and Toxic Bananas. They said the LSA Morse code decipher says, if you are reading this, then you are one of the Morse code people. Ha ha, beep boop, long live the LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and that is the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. that was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 800th day of the war. I ran out of Morse code message ideas for the 800th day, so that was the one. But congratulations on getting that dead on the nail again. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the live chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and first up from the live chat, we have one from Leopard the Bismarck, who says, question, are all these moves against Russian aviation and anti-air systems purely to prepare to fly the F-16?
I would say, can you reread that one again real quick, Matthew?
They said, are all these moves against Russian aviation and anti-air systems purely to prepare to fly the F-16s?
I think it may be, but I also think that it's to try and improve the ground situation at the moment, because the ground situation isn't exactly the best thing right now, considering that the Russians are throwing everything they have at the Ukrainians to try and gain some small victories for May 9th. It does appear that they are just trying to move the Russian Air Force out of the picture, so that way the ground situation is a lot more advantageous for them just at this moment, not really waiting for the F-16 or anything. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to O-Tubes, who says, I read on some news online overnight that apparently Russia will be joining China to attack Taiwan when they do. And what are your thoughts?
I would have to say that China is probably not going to attack Taiwan, at least within the scope of the Ukraine war or in relation to it. It's probably going to be an entirely separate thing whenever it does happen. And right now, a lot of military analysts are saying it's going to be happening in years, if you can take their word for it, and that's going to be way out of the picture or way out of the scope of the Ukraine war by the time it would actually happen. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Gia Turner, who says, from what the military people I know are saying, it sounds like the U.S. is preparing to have troops in Iran. And what are your thoughts on that?
I doubt that a little bit. The U.S. having troops in Iran would be pretty odd, actually. It would actually be pretty tough to deal with Iran because most of the Iranian population centers are on the southern end of the Caspian Sea, meaning that we would pretty much have to move all the way through Iran, either from the Persian Gulf or from the borders of Iraq, which is highly unlikely, to the population centers to actually try and get any sort of control or begin an occupation of the country to form an interim government. So going off of that, I would have to believe that that is possibly unlikely at the moment. And it also appears that the United States is really trying to give the Middle East a wide berth and not really get directly involved in anything. So I'd also believe for that reason, we are probably not going to see U.S. forces on the ground in Iran anytime in the future. I don't think we'll ever see any forces that are not Iran's inside of Iran in the near future. Israel has no way to invade Iran from the ground at the moment, or at least in any large form, or support that. And also, no other country really wants to get involved in that role where they actually invade Iran and occupy the country for a while. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and believe it or not, we've actually run through all of our live chat questions up to this point. We have one question left right here. So, Enforcer, are you going to do the thing?
And so we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And what, Jack? I was in the Himalayas. Anyways, it's Repeat Defender. He says, how long do y'all think it'll take Ukraine to get rid of all those mines and everything after this mess is over?
It probably will. They'll probably never be able to get rid of all of them. That's the honest answer. Because even in France, after World War I has been over for 110 years now. Well, actually, not 110. It's more like 106 years now. It's been over. They still have not been able to clear the mines and explosives from large parts of France. And those areas are called the red zones or the zone rouge. And those areas are completely unenterable by normal people because the ground's contaminated because of chemical warfare. And also, not only that, there's a load of mines and unexploded artillery rounds that still exist there that are a massive danger. So the reality is that they'll be able to clear out a lot of them. And it'll be a never-ending process, but they'll never clear out all of them within the time of our lives. A lot of those will end up staying in the ground or end up blowing up at random times, and then that's when people will find out that there were still mines in the area. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much for watching this channel tonight and enjoying it a great deal. At the peak, there were around 8.2 thousand people who were here, and 55,000 of y'all have watched this stream before it ended. We are entirely grateful and highly honored to know that y'all pick us to be y'all source of news on the war on a daily basis. There's many other channels that y'all could pick. We don't know why y'all picked this one, but we are always happy to be able to share the news with each and every one of y'all every single day. If y'all did enjoy this channel and you're new to it, make sure to subscribe, because it makes us really happy. It doesn't help us out in the algorithms or anything. It just makes us really happy. And also, if you hit the bell button, it might notify you. There's no guarantee, but it might notify you that we're running live streams and making short war videos in the middle of the day. And we do these live streams 6 days a week, every day but Monday. And we also run short war videos pretty much every day that there's news by that point in the day. So if anything big has happened at all, we will be making a video on it pretty much 7 days a week. And so with that, it is time for us to end. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. Thank you all for the great stream tonight. Actually, somewhat of a shorter stream tonight, so sort of shockingly. So with that, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, and be sure to join us tomorrow for the Short War Summary, and also at 10 p.m. Eastern for the new stream once again. And with that, good night.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its